They say a queen's power lies in her crown. But what happens when the crown stays and the queen is cast aside like yesterday's trash? Queen Elira Vale gave everything to a kingdom that whispered she wasn't beautiful enough to deserve it. She bled loyalty into every stone of that palace. And tonight, she's about to hear the one truth that will shatter her world. Her king, her husband, the man she built an empire for, just called her a burden and brought another woman into their bed. This is the story of a woman who refused to disappear when the world tried to erase her. Stick around till the end, hit that like button, and drop your city in the comments, so I know where my tribe is watching from. Trust me, you're not ready for where this goes. The throne room smelled like old blood and older lies. Elira stood at the edge of the grand hall, her fingers tracing the cold marble pillar as servants rushed past her like she was invisible. She'd been standing there for 20 minutes, waiting for an audience with her own husband, and not one soul had acknowledged her presence, not even a glance. She was the queen, for God's sake. But in this palace, that title had become nothing more than a word stitched onto expensive fabric. Her gown hung heavy on her shoulders, deep crimson velvet that pooled at her feet. It was the kind of dress that screamed power, commanded attention, but Elira had learned long ago that fabric meant nothing when the woman wearing it was deemed unworthy of desire. The courtiers whispered. They always whispered, not loud enough for her to catch the words, but loud enough to let her know they were talking, about her plain face, her unremarkable figure, the way the king's eyes slid past her at banquets like she was part of the furniture. She straightened her spine and walked forward, boots clicking against stone. The guards at the door stiffened, then parted without ceremony. No bow, no greeting, just the mechanical movement of bodies trained to open doors. Inside, King Alaric Thorne sat sprawled across his throne like a man who'd never questioned his right to everything he touched. His dark hair was slicked back, jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and those storm-gray eyes that once made her heart race now looked at her with the warmth of a winter grave. He didn't stand when she entered, didn't even straighten. "You summoned me," she said. Her voice carried across the empty room, steady as iron. Alaric's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "Elira. Yes, we need to discuss the northern provinces. The grain tax is causing unrest." She moved closer, each step measured. "We discussed this last month. I suggested lowering the levy by 15% and distributing surplus from the southern estates. You agreed it was sound." "I did," he said, fingers drumming on the armrest. "But I've reconsidered. Seraphine thinks we should maintain the tax and increase military presence instead." The name landed like a stone in still water. Elira's jaw tightened. Seraphine. Lady Seraphine Ashcroft, the new fixture at court. The woman who'd appeared 3 months ago, draped in silk and confidence, who laughed too loud at the king's jokes and touched his arm too often at dinners. The woman who was everything Elira wasn't, golden-haired, full-lipped, built like a damn sculpture of some fertility goddess. Seraphine, Elira repeated slowly, isn't a political advisor. She's a baroness from a minor house with no experience in governance. Alaric's eyes hardened. She has instincts. Fresh perspective. Fresh. Right. Elira felt something cold settle in her chest, spreading through her ribs like frost. And my perspective, the one that's kept this kingdom stable for 12 years, is what? Stale? Don't be dramatic. He waved a hand dismissively. You're excellent at the administrative details, Elira. No one disputes that. But leadership requires more than competence. It requires vision, presence. The unspoken words hung between them like a noose. You lack both. She'd heard variations of this her entire marriage. Never direct enough to be called cruelty, but constant enough to hollow her out from the inside. The courtiers said it louder. The servants whispered it in corners. Even the visiting dignitaries raised eyebrows when introduced to the plain-faced queen who'd somehow captured a king's hand in marriage, but never his heart. Elira had learned to armor herself against it, to bury the hurt so deep it couldn't touch her while she worked, while she managed treaties and trade routes and kept the kingdom's machinery running smooth as silk, while Alaric played king and took credit for her strategies. But this was different. I see, she said quietly. Then I suppose my counsel is no longer required. Alaric stood, descending the dais with the lazy grace of a predator. When he reached her, he placed one hand on her shoulder, The touch was perfunctory, cold. Elira, you're my wife, my queen. That doesn't change. But a king has needs, demands on his attention that require different kinds of support. Different kinds. Her throat felt tight. You mean her? His hand dropped. His eyes slid away. She understands things you don't. Like what? Elira's voice cracked despite her best effort. Like how to stroke your ego. How to laugh at your terrible jokes. How to look pretty on your arm while the kingdom burns. That's enough. His voice went hard, the tone he used with insubordinate generals. You're dismissed. For a moment, Elira just stood there, staring at the man she'd loved for 12 years. The man she'd built a life around. The man who was now looking at her like she was an inconvenience to be managed. She turned and walked out, spine straight, head high. She didn't run. Didn't let her hands shake until she was 3 corridors away, tucked into an alcove behind a tapestry where no one could see her. Press her palms against the stone and breathe through the rage and shame burning in her throat. This was how it happened, she realized. This was how they erased you. Not with violence or drama, but with quiet dismissal. With another woman's laughter echoing through halls that used to be yours. With your husband's eyes looking past you like you were already gone. Masikal. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in humiliation. Seraphine was everywhere. At council meetings, seated 2 chairs from the king, offering suggestions about matters she knew nothing about. At dinners, positioned at Alaric's right hand while Elira sat 5 seats down, watching them lean into each other like conspirators. In the gardens, walking arm in arm while courtiers trailed behind like a parade celebrating Elira's obsolescence. And Alaric ate it up, laughed louder, stood taller, touched Seraphine's waist with an ease he'd never shown his own wife. The whispers got louder too, less careful. Elira caught fragments as she moved through the palace. Can you blame him? Poor man's been tied to that for over a decade. She's competent, I'll give her that. But competence doesn't warm a bed. I heard he's considering setting her aside. Annulment on grounds of, well, you know. Elira's maid, a sharp-eyed woman named Mara, who'd served her for 8 years, started leaving extra wine in her chambers each night. She never said why. Didn't need to. The pity in her eyes said everything. But Elira didn't drink the wine, didn't cry into her pillows or rage at the unfairness. Instead, she worked. Threw herself into the kingdom's accounts, into supply chain problems and border disputes and trade negotiations. If she wasn't wanted as a wife, fine. She'd be indispensable as a strategist. Late one night, she was bent over reports in her private study when Mara knocked softly. My queen, there's something you should know. Elira looked up, rubbing her tired eyes. What is it? Mara hesitated, twisting her hands. The king, he's moved Lady Seraphine into the East Wing, the royal apartments. The words hit like a fist to the gut. Those apartments were reserved for the king's closest family. For the queen, before Elira had been quietly relocated to the North Tower 5 years ago, under the pretense of giving her more space for her work. I see, Elira said flatly. Thank you, Mara. The maid lingered. My queen, the staff, we remember. We remember who kept food in our bellies during the famine, who made sure our children had medicine during the plague. We remember. Something in Elira's chest cracked open, not enough to break her, but enough to let a sliver of warmth through. She managed a small smile. I appreciate that. After Mara left, Elira sat in the silence of her study and let herself feel it. All of it. The rage and shame and bitter burning hurt. Then she stood, walked to her window, and looked out over the kingdom she'd helped build. They could take her husband, her title, her dignity. But they couldn't take what she knew, what she'd learned. The loyalty she'd earned from people who mattered more than courtiers and pretty baronesses. And in that moment, Elira Vale made a choice. She would not disappear quietly. The turning point came 6 days later. Elira was walking through the servants' corridor, heading to the kitchens to discuss winter provisions with the head cook, when she heard voices drifting from an open door. The king's private study. She should have kept walking, should have ignored it like she ignored most things now. But she heard her name. She stopped, pressing herself against the wall, heart hammering. Alaric's voice frustrated. I'm telling you, Seraphine, the council won't accept it. Elira's been queen for 12 years. Half of them are personally loyal to her. Then make them disloyal. Seraphine's voice was honey over steel. You're the king, Alaric. Act like it. Show them she's a burden you've carried too long out of misplaced duty. A burden. The word detonated in Elira's chest like black powder. She's not a burden, Alaric said, but there was hesitation in his voice. Doubt. She's competent, reliable. Seraphine laughed, the sound cruel and bright. Competent. My love, you don't keep a woman for competence. You hire a secretary for that. A wife should inspire you, make you feel like the king you are, not remind you of obligations and duties like some nagging merchant's daughter. Silence. Then Alaric, quieter. You make me feel alive, Sarah, like I'm not just playing a role. Because you're not. Not with me. Seraphine's voice turned soft, intimate. Send her away, Alaric, to one of the northern estates. Tell the court she's retired for her health. We both know she'll go quietly. She always does. And then you'll be free to rule the way you were meant to, with a woman worthy of standing beside you. More silence. Elira waited, some desperate part of her hoping Alaric would defend her, would remember the 12 years she'd given him, the strategies, the sacrifices, the nights she'd stayed up planning while he slept. You're right, Alaric finally said. I'll speak to the council next week. Elira didn't wait to hear more. She turned and walked back the way she came, each step mechanical, her mind a blank white roar. Burden. Nagging merchant's daughter. Not worthy. She made it to her chambers, closed the door, and stood in the center of the room as the world tilted sideways. For 12 years, she'd told herself that love could be earned through loyalty, through service, through making herself so useful, so indispensable, that her lack of beauty wouldn't matter. She'd been wrong, and now they were going to discard her like garbage. The rage came then, hot and clean and clarifying. It burned through the shame, through the hurt, leaving nothing but cold, hard clarity. She walked to her desk, pulled out parchment, and began to write. Names, alliances, who owed her favors, who remembered her kindness, the generals she'd helped promote, the merchants she'd supported, the nobles whose families she'd aided during crises. She'd spent 12 years building a kingdom while her husband played king and the court judged her face. Now it was time to see what that was worth. The next morning, Elira did something she hadn't done in years. She went to the training yards. The soldiers looked up in surprise as the queen crossed the dusty ground, her plain brown riding dress a stark contrast to the armor and sweat around her. General Kyle Thorne, a grizzled veteran with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, approached and bowed. Your Majesty, this is unexpected. Walk with me, General, Elira said. They moved to the edge of the yard, out of earshot. Kyle had served under her father before the old king died. He'd supported her marriage to Alaric because she'd asked him to, had believed in her when she said she could help stabilize the realm. I need your honest assessment, she said without preamble. If the kingdom faced a crisis tomorrow, who would the soldiers follow? The king or me? Kyle's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. That's a dangerous question, my queen. I know. Answer it anyway. He studied her for a long moment. The men respect strength. They respect competence. They respect someone who remembers their names and fights for their interests. He paused. You've done more for the military in 12 years than any monarch in my lifetime. You secured better wages, better equipment, better support for their families. So if you're asking who they'd follow in a crisis, the answer might surprise the king. Elira felt something settle in her chest. Certainty. Thank you, General. That's all I needed to know. As she turned to leave, Kyle spoke again. Your Majesty, whatever's coming, we haven't forgotten who you are. She didn't respond, didn't need to. The message was clear. Over the next week, Elira moved through the palace like a ghost, observing everything. Seraphine held court in the gardens, surrounded by fawning nobles. Alaric made increasingly erratic decisions, overruling his advisors on Seraphine's whispered suggestions. The council members grew restless, exchanging worried glances during meetings. And Elira watched, learned, planned. She met quietly with the head of the treasury, a nervous man named Finch who'd always been loyal, reviewed contracts with the master of coin, had tea with the wives of influential lords, Women who remembered when she'd helped their daughters find good marriages or secured positions for their sons. She didn't ask for anything, didn't make promises, just reminded them, with her presence and her attention, that she was still here, still watching, still Queen Elira Vale, the woman who'd held this kingdom together while others played at power. The crisis came faster than she expected. 2 weeks after she'd overheard Alaric's conversation, word arrived from the eastern border. Lord Rhine Caldwell, a powerful vassal who controlled 3 provinces and a private army, was marching toward the capital. The council convened in chaos. Alaric sat at the head of the table, face pale, while advisors shouted over each other. "It's a misunderstanding," one lord insisted. "Caldwell's been loyal for 20 years. He's been taxed into rebellion," another countered. "The new grain levies destroyed his people's stores. We need to send the army," a third said. "Show strength." Elira sat silent, watching. Seraphine was there too, looking beautiful and utterly lost. This wasn't a dinner party or a garden walk. This was real power, real consequences, and she had no idea what to do. Alaric slammed his hand on the table. "Enough! We'll negotiate. Send an envoy." "My king," General Kale said carefully, "Caldwell's already executed the last envoy you sent. He's not interested in talking." "Then what do you suggest?" Alaric's voice cracked with frustration. Every eye in the room shifted. Some to the general, some to the advisors, and some to Elira. She felt the weight of their gazes, the expectation. For 12 years, she'd been the one who solved problems, who found solutions when everyone else saw walls. Alaric noticed the shift. His jaw tightened. "Elira, do you have something to contribute?" She met his eyes across the table, measured her words. "Caldwell isn't rebelling against you, Alaric. He's rebelling against policy. Bad policy. The grain tax was a mistake. I told you that 3 months ago." Seraphine spoke up, voice bright with false confidence. Sometimes subjects need to be reminded of their place. Strength, not appeasement. Several advisors winced. Kale's expression went carefully blank. Elira smiled, cold and thin. "Lady Seraphine, when was the last time you visited the eastern provinces? Spoke to the people there? Understood their economy?" Seraphine's perfect face flushed. "I don't need to visit peasants to understand power." "No," Elira said softly. "You understand seduction, but you don't understand kingdoms. And right now your pillow talk advice is about to start a civil war." The room went dead silent. Alaric shot to his feet. "How dare you!" Elira stood too, meeting him eye to eye. "How dare I?" "How dare I what, Alaric? Tell the truth? Point out that your mistress is playing dress-up while your kingdom burns? That you've ignored every competent voice in this room because she makes you feel alive?" "Get out," Alaric hissed. "Now." Elira gathered her papers, spine straight. She looked at each council member in turn. "When this falls apart, when Caldwell's army is at your gates and you're scrambling for solutions, you know where to find me. I'll be in my chambers, doing the work, like always." She walked out, door closing behind her with a quiet click. Behind her, she heard chaos erupt. Shouting, accusations, the sound of Alaric trying to regain control and failing. She kept walking. 3 days later, everything went to hell. Caldwell's forces reached the capital's outer defenses. More lords joined him, bringing their own armies, their own grievances. The kingdom that Alaric had taken for granted was fracturing, and he had no idea how to stop it. Seraphine tried to help, suggested throwing a feast to boost morale. Alaric actually listened, which made things worse. The court watched in horror as their king fiddled while his realm burned. And then the second shoe dropped. General Kale came to Elira's chambers at midnight, face grim. "My queen, we've intercepted communications. Lady Seraphine has been in contact with Caldwell's camp." Elira's blood went cold. "What kind of contact? The kind where she's promised to deliver the king's military plans in exchange for a position in Caldwell's new regime." Kale's voice was hard as stone. "She's been playing him from the start, playing all of us." For a moment, Elira couldn't breathe. The betrayal was so perfectly calculated, so coldly executed. Seraphine hadn't just seduced Alaric, she'd positioned herself to destroy him. "Does he know?" Elira asked. "Not yet." Kale met her eyes. "But he needs to. Question is, who tells him?" And what happens after? Elira stood, mind racing through possibilities, through consequences. This was it, the moment where everything either fell apart completely or got pulled back from the edge. The moment where she had to choose. Save the man who'd called her a burden? The kingdom that had whispered she wasn't worthy? Or let it all burn and walk away free? She looked at Kael. Assemble the loyalists, everyone who still remembers what this kingdom was supposed to be. I need them in the war room in 1 hour. And the king? Elira's smile was sharp as a knife. Let him enjoy his last night of ignorance. Tomorrow, everyone faces the truth. Us. The war room filled slowly. General Kael, Lord Finch from the Treasury, Commander Dara of the City Guard, Master Chen, the spy master who'd served in silence for 20 years, a dozen others, men and women who'd built their careers on competence rather than flattery. They looked at Elira with something she hadn't seen in a long time, respect and hope. She spread the intercepted letters across the table. Read these. They did. She watched shock and anger ripple through the room. Seraphine Ashcroft, Elira said quietly, has been working with our enemies from the moment she arrived at court. She seduced the king to gain access to information. She's been feeding Caldwell intelligence about our defenses, our supply lines, our internal divisions. She turned our king into a weapon against his own kingdom. That treasonous bitch, Dara breathed. Yes, Elira agreed. And tomorrow, the king is planning to announce his intention to set me aside and legitimize her position, which would give her exactly what she needs to complete the betrayal. What do we do? Finch asked, hands shaking. If we expose her without proof Alaric will accept, he'll think we're conspiring against him. We don't expose her to him, Elira said. We expose her to everyone, publicly, undeniably. And we do it in a way that forces Alaric to see what he's become. How? Kael leaned forward. Elira's smile was cold and terrible and absolutely certain. We give her exactly what she wants. We let her think she's won. And then we pull the rug out so hard she won't know what hit her. She began laying out the plan. It was ruthless, precise, required perfect timing and absolute trust. When she finished, the room was silent. Finally, Kael spoke. My queen, if this works, you'll have saved the kingdom. If it fails, we'll all hang for treason. Elira met his eyes. Then we'd better not fail. One by one, they nodded, pledged themselves to her plan, to her. As they filed out to prepare, Master Chen lingered. Your Majesty, he said quietly, you've changed. Have I? The woman who married the king 12 years ago would have tried to save her marriage. You're trying to save a kingdom. That's different. Elira looked down at the letters on the table. Evidence of betrayal, of manipulation, of everything she'd endured being weaponized against her home. Maybe I finally learned what actually matters. Chen bowed and left. Elira stood alone in the war room, surrounded by maps and plans and the weight of what was coming. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, she'd either pull her kingdom back from the edge or watch it shatter. But tonight, for the first time in 12 years, Queen Elira Vale felt like more than a burden. She felt like a weapon. And she was about to remind everyone why weapons were dangerous when you forgot they were loaded. Dawn broke cold and sharp. Elira dressed in her finest gown, deep midnight blue with silver threading. She looked like a storm made flesh. Mara helped her with the clasps, hands steady despite the fear in her eyes. Today, the maid whispered. Today, Elira confirmed. She walked to the throne room where Alaric had called an emergency council. The room was packed. Every noble, every advisor, every courtier who'd whispered about her for 12 years. Seraphine stood at Alaric's right hand, radiant in white and gold, looking like she'd already won. Alaric stood as Elira entered. His face was haggard, sleepless. My lords and ladies, he began, we face dark times, but I've consulted with Lady Seraphine and others, and we've developed a strategy to— My king! Elira's voice cut across the room like a blade. Before you continue, there's evidence the council needs to see. Alaric's eyes narrowed. This isn't the time, Elira. Actually, she said, stepping forward, it's exactly the time. Because what you're about to propose is based on intelligence and counsel provided by someone who's been betraying you from the start. Seraphine's face went perfectly still. That's a serious accusation, Your Majesty. It is, Elira agreed. Master Chen, if you would. The spy master stepped forward, holding the letters. These intercepted communications prove that Lady Seraphine has been in contact with Lord Caldwell's forces. She's been providing tactical information, encouraging the king to make poor strategic decisions, and positioning herself to switch sides once the kingdom is sufficiently weakened. Lies, Seraphine said, but her voice shook slightly. Desperate lies from a woman who's been set aside. Elira smiled. Then you won't mind if we have Lord Caldwell's messenger, who we captured last night, repeat what you promised him in exchange for a place in his new regime? The messenger was brought forward, testified in clear, damning detail. The room erupted. Nobles shouting, Seraphine backing toward the door, Alaric standing frozen, face white as death, and Elira standing in the center of it all, finally letting them see what 12 years of quiet competence looked like when it stopped being quiet. Guards, she said, arrest Lady Seraphine Ashcroft for high treason. As they dragged Seraphine away, still screaming denials, Alaric turned to Elira. His eyes were hollow, devastated. You knew. This whole time. I knew, Elira said, for 3 days. Long enough to build a case, not long enough to stop you from nearly destroying everything. He started, then stopped. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything, Elira told him. Just listen, because I'm not done. She turned to face the council. The court. All of them. This kingdom is fracturing. Caldwell's army is days away. We have one chance to pull this back, and it requires every one of you to decide right now where your loyalty lies. With the throne? Or with the person who's kept that throne standing while everyone else played games? The silence was deafening. Then General Kael stepped forward. I stand with Queen Elira. One by one, they followed. The treasury, the guard, the nobles who remembered, even some who'd whispered about her. They stepped forward and declared themselves. And Alaric stood alone, watching his wife command the loyalty he'd taken for granted. Elira looked at him, one last time as the woman who'd loved him. I'll save your kingdom, Alaric, not because you deserve it, but because the people who live here do. And when this is over, she stopped. Let the words hang. Let him imagine. Let him fear. Then she turned and walked toward the war table, calling orders, assembling her forces, becoming exactly what she'd always been beneath the quiet exterior, a queen who'd forgotten she didn't need anyone's permission to be powerful. Behind her, Alaric sank into his throne and put his head in his hands, and the storm that was Elira Vale finally broke free. But in the shadows of the throne room, a figure watched, one of Caldwell's spies who'd infiltrated the palace weeks ago. And as Elira rallied her forces, as she prepared to save a kingdom that had never valued her, that spy slipped away with one crucial piece of information. Caldwell now knew exactly who his real enemy was, and he was coming for her specifically. The battle for the kingdom was about to become personal in ways Elira couldn't imagine. The spy was already 3 corridors away before anyone noticed the door to the archives had been left open. His name was Varen, and he'd been embedded in the palace kitchens for 6 weeks, invisible in the way servants always are to people who wear crowns. He'd watched Elira move through the palace like a woman waking from a long sleep, had seen her gathering her pieces, positioning her players, and now he'd heard everything he needed. He slipped through a service exit, past guards too focused on the chaos in the throne room to notice one more body in Cook's clothing. By sunset, he'd be riding hard for Caldwell's camp with intelligence worth more than gold. Queen Elira Vale wasn't just salvaging a broken kingdom, she was preparing to fight, and Lord Caldwell needed to know exactly who he was up against. Because the woman they'd all dismissed as too plain, too quiet, too unremarkable to matter, had just proven she was the most dangerous person in the realm. Bok. Inside the war room, Elira stood over maps spread across a table that had seen 100 battles planned and lost. The parchment was old, edges curling, marked with ink from dead generals and forgotten campaigns. She traced a finger along the eastern approach where Caldwell's forces were positioned. He'll expect us to fortify the capital, she said, Dig in and wait for reinforcements from the southern provinces. General Kael stood at her right, arms crossed, studying the map with a soldier's eye. That's standard siege defense. He's got the numbers, we've got the walls. Which is exactly why we're not doing it. Elira looked up, met his gaze. Caldwell's been fed intelligence for months. He knows our garrison strength, our supply lines, our defensive capabilities. Seraphine made sure of that. So if we do what he expects, we're playing a game he's already won. Commander Dara leaned forward, a stocky woman with scars on her knuckles from 20 years of city patrol. What are you suggesting, my queen? We make him think we're doing exactly what he expects. But we move our real force here. Elira's finger landed on a river valley 15 miles north of the capital. It's narrow, heavily wooded. If we position archers on the ridges and pike units at the choke points, we can turn his advantage into a death trap. The room went quiet. Lord Finch, the nervous treasurer, cleared his throat. He paused, searching for words. That's aggressive, Your Majesty. We'd be abandoning defensive positions to meet him in the field. Yes, Elira said simply. And if it fails? If he outmaneuvers us? Then we lose everything faster than if we hide behind walls and starve. She straightened, looking at each of them in turn. Caldwell thinks he's marching on a fractured kingdom led by a weak king and a dismissed queen. Let's show him what happens when he underestimates the wrong woman. There's a truth about power that people who inherit it never understand. Real power isn't given. It's taken, inch by bloody inch, from the hands of people who thought they could keep it by divine right or accident of birth. Elira had spent 12 years watching her husband sit on a throne he'd inherited from a father who'd inherited it from a grandfather who'd won it in a war nobody remembered. Alaric thought the crown made him powerful. But crowns are just metal. Power is what you build when nobody's watching. It's the loyalty you earn in shadows, the debts you're owed by people who matter, the competence you demonstrate when everyone else is playing dress-up. And right now in this room, Elira was calling in 12 years of debts. Kael nodded slowly. I'll need 2 days to move the troops without being obvious. You have one, Elira said. Caldwell's moving faster than expected. Master Chen's scouts report he'll reach the capital's outer markers in 70 hours. Then we move tonight. Dara's voice was steel. Under cover of darkness, small units, separate routes. We converge at the valley by dawn. Elira felt something settle in her chest. Not peace, not calm, but the cold, hard certainty of a decision made and owned. Do it. They filed out, each to their tasks, leaving Elira alone with the maps and the weight of what she'd just set in motion. She was gambling everything on one brutal play. If it worked, they'd cripple Caldwell's army before it reached the capital. If it failed, she'd have sacrificed their best forces and left the city defenseless. But doing nothing was death. Slow, inevitable, humiliating death. She'd take the quick kind if she had to. At least it would be on her terms. The door opened behind her. She didn't turn, already knowing who it was by the heaviness of the footsteps. Alaric's voice was hoarse. You're really doing this? I'm saving your kingdom, she said flatly, still studying the maps. Yes, it's not just my kingdom. It's ours. Now Elira did turn. Looked at the man she'd married 12 years ago. He looked older suddenly, like the last few hours had aged him a decade. His perfect face was drawn, eyes shadowed with something that might have been regret, or might have just been fear. Don't, she said quietly. Don't do that. Do what? Pretend this is ours. Pretend you didn't spend the last 3 months replacing me piece by piece while your mistress sold us out to our enemies. She kept her voice level, empty of the rage burning in her gut. You called me a burden, Alaric. You planned to set me aside like damaged furniture. So don't stand here now and claim partnership. He flinched. I was wrong. Yes, you were. Elira, He stopped, swallowed hard. I don't know how to fix this. You don't. She turned back to the maps. But you can stay out of my way while I fix the mess you made. The silence stretched like a blade between them. Finally, Alaric spoke, voice barely above a whisper. I loved you. Once. And there it was. The admission that hurt more than any insult. Once. Past tense. Like love was something that expired when the packaging wasn't pretty enough. I know, Elira said. I loved you too. Enough to build you an empire. Enough to ignore every whisper, every slight. Every night you looked past me like I was invisible. Enough to keep this kingdom running while you played at being king. She looked at him over her shoulder. But love isn't enough when you're married to a man who mistakes beauty for value and flattery for wisdom. That's not fair. Fair? Elira's laugh was sharp and bitter. You want to talk about fair? I gave you 12 years. I gave you stability, strategy, every ounce of competence I had. And the second a pretty face batted her eyes at you, you threw it all away. Threw me away. So don't stand there and lecture me about fair. Alaric's jaw tightened. I made mistakes. I know that now. But I'm still your king. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, the only reason you're still sitting on that throne is because I'm holding it up. She moved closer, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. And here's the thing about thrones, Alaric. They're only as strong as the foundation. You might wear the crown, but I'm the foundation. So maybe you should start asking yourself what happens if I decide to stop holding you up. Understanding the psychology of a king who's never been challenged is like understanding a child who's never heard the word no. Alaric had been raised to believe his desires were commandments, his whims were policy, his comfort was the natural order of things. He'd been taught that being king meant being obeyed. Nobody had ever explained that being king meant being alone, that every decision was yours to make and yours to live with, that the crown didn't make you powerful, it made you responsible, and responsibility was a weight that crushed men who thought they were entitled to ease. Looking at Alaric now, Elira could see the moment he understood. The moment the weight of what he'd done, what he'd nearly destroyed, finally landed on his shoulders. It bent him, made him smaller. What do you need from me? He asked finally. Nothing, she said. I need nothing from you, Alaric. Just stay in the palace. Look like a king. Let me do what I've always done. And after? When this is over? Elira smiled, cold and final. After, we'll see if there's anything left worth saving. She walked past him, out of the war room, leaving him standing alone with maps and consequences. What that? The troops moved in darkness, shadows peeling away from the capital in groups of 20, 30, filtering through gates and service roads like water-finding cracks. By midnight, half the garrison was gone. By dawn, the capital would look defended while its real strength positioned for ambush 15 miles north. Elira rode with the first wave, dressed in leather armor borrowed from a dead soldier's trunk. It fit poorly, too big in the shoulders, too tight in the waist, but it was functional. Kael had argued against her coming, said a queen belonged in the palace, not on a battlefield. She told him if he wanted her to stay behind, he'd have to tie her up. He'd looked at her for a long moment, then handed her a sword. They reached the valley 3 hours before dawn, horses breathing hard in the cold air. The river cut through the terrain like a scar, banks steep and rocky. Trees crowded close on both sides, old growth that blocked moonlight and turned the ground into a maze of roots and shadows. Perfect killing ground if you were defending, death trap if you were attacking. Elira dismounted, boots squelching in mud. Kael was already positioning units, his voice low and steady as he directed archers to the ridges, pike formations to the narrows. Dara organized the city guard, placing them at fallback positions in case the first line broke. Commander? Elira's voice cut through the organized chaos. A word. Dara approached, face grim in the pre-dawn gloom. My queen. When Caldwell arrives, he's going to see the trap. He's not stupid, so he'll either retreat or try to force through anyway. If he retreats, we've bought time but solved nothing. If he forces through, people are going to die. A lot of people. Dara's expression didn't change. Yes, ma'am. I need you to understand something. Elira looked at the woman who'd spent 2 decades keeping the capital's streets safe. I'm asking you to spend lives today. Good people who've done nothing wrong except serve a kingdom that's falling apart. And I need to know you're willing to make that choice. There's a calculus to war that civilians never understand. Every strategic decision is a transaction in blood. You spend lives to buy time. You sacrifice units to preserve flanks. You watch good soldiers die because the alternative is watching everyone die. Commanders who can't make that math don't last. They hesitate at the wrong moment and get their entire force killed instead of just part of it. Elira had never been a soldier, but she'd spent 12 years managing resources, making hard calls about where to allocate limited supplies during famines and plagues. She understood the math of sacrifice, understood that leadership meant choosing who lived and who didn't, and living with those choices forever. Dara met her eyes. I've been making that choice for 20 years, Your Majesty. Every time I send guards into the slums, every time we break up riots or chase down murderers, I'm gambling with lives. So, yes, I'm willing. Because the alternative is Caldwell taking the capital and killing everyone anyway. Elira nodded. Then make it count. As Dara moved back to her units, Master Chen appeared at Elira's elbow, like smoke. The spy master was a small man, unassuming, the kind of person you forgot was in the room, which made him exceptionally good at his job. My queen, he said quietly, a word about Lord Caldwell. Go ahead. He's not just a rebel lord. Chen's voice was barely audible. He's been planning this for 2 years, building alliances, stockpiling weapons, positioning his people in key locations. Seraphine wasn't his first plant in the palace. She was just the most effective. Elira's blood went cold. Who else? We're still identifying them. But you need to understand this isn't about taxes or policy. Caldwell wants the throne. He's been building toward a coup, and your husband's weakness with Seraphine just gave him the opening he needed. Does Alaric know? Chen's silence was answer enough. Elira closed her eyes, breathed through the implications. If Caldwell had been planning this for years, then today's battle wasn't the end. It was the opening move. Win or lose, the kingdom was looking at civil war. How many loyalists do we have? She asked. Fewer than you'd hope. More than Caldwell expects. Chen paused. But my queen, there's something else. Caldwell knows you're coming. What? We caught one of his scouts heading back to camp an hour ago. He'd been in the palace. Heard your plan in the throne room. Caldwell knows you're not defending the capital. He knows about this valley. The words landed like stones. Elira's mind raced, recalculating, adjusting. If Caldwell knew they were here, he could avoid the trap entirely. Circle around, hit the capital while their forces were out of position. Or he could spring his own counter-trap, catch them in the valley with reinforcements hidden in the hills. Either way, her perfect ambush had just turned into a gamble with worse odds. How long ago did the scout leave? She demanded. 6 hours. Maybe 7. Enough time to get word to Caldwell. Enough time for him to change his plans. Elira looked at the valley, at her troops positioned and ready, and felt the jaws of the trap closing. Not on Caldwell. On her. Do we pull back? Chen asked. No. She said it without hesitation, surprising herself. We're committed. If we pull back now, we lose the initiative and Caldwell knows we're scrambling. We hold position, adjust for the possibility he's adjusted, and we pray he's arrogant enough to think he can beat us anyway. That's a hell of a prayer. Elira smiled, sharp and dangerous. I'm not praying to anyone but myself these days, and I've got 12 years of reasons to win. Bezmuk. Dawn broke slow and cold, mist rising from the river like ghosts. Elira stood on the ridge, watching the eastern road. Behind her, 200 archers waited in silence, arrows nocked, breathing shallow. Below, pike units held the narrows, shields locked, eyes forward. The entire valley was a held breath. And then, through the mist, the first shapes appeared. Caldwell's army was massive, easily 1,500 strong, maybe more. They moved in formation, disciplined and steady, banners snapping in the morning wind. At the center, a figure on a black warhorse sat tall and unmistakable. Lord Rhine Caldwell himself. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a commander's presence that made other men look small. Even from a distance, Elira could feel the weight of his confidence. He knew they were here, and he'd come anyway. Kale appeared beside her, face grim. He's not slowing down. He's calling our bluff. Elira's voice was steady. He thinks superior numbers will carry the day. Will they? She looked at the general. We're about to find out. Caldwell's forces reached the valley entrance. For a moment, they paused. Elira could see officers conferring, pointing at the terrain, the trees, the ridges. They knew. Had to know. This was textbook ambush ground. But Caldwell raised his hand, gave a signal, and the army pushed forward into the narrows. Arrogance. The fatal flaw of men who've never lost. Caldwell had the numbers, the momentum, the intelligence. He probably thought Elira was bluffing, that she didn't have the spine to actually spend lives. Or maybe he just didn't care. thought he could absorb casualties and still win through sheer force. He was about to learn differently. Now, Elira said quietly. Kael raised his arm, brought it down sharp. Arrows flew. The first volley hit like a hammer. Men screamed, horses shrieked. The disciplined formation fractured as soldiers scrambled for cover that didn't exist. The second volley followed before they could regroup, punching through armor and shields, dropping bodies into the mud. Caldwell's officers shouted orders, trying to organize a response, but the valley's narrowness worked against them. They couldn't spread out, couldn't flank, couldn't do anything but push forward or retreat. And Caldwell wasn't retreating. "Pike units," Kael barked. The pike formation surged forward, catching Caldwell's vanguard at the narrows. Steel met steel with a sound like the world breaking. Men fought and died in the mud, blood turning the river red. Elira watched from the ridge, every muscle tight, every sense screaming. This was her plan, her strategy. Every man dying down there was dying because she'd chosen this ground, this fight, this moment. The weight of command is the weight of ghosts. Every decision you make creates them. The soldier who dies because you positioned him wrong. The family who starves because you allocated supplies elsewhere. The city that burns because you gambled on the wrong intelligence. Good commanders learn to carry ghosts. Great commanders learn to weaponize them. They turn grief into fury, guilt into precision, and they use the memory of past failures to avoid future ones. Elira was learning, in real time, what it meant to own her choices. To watch people die for decisions she'd made and know she'd make the same choice again because the alternative was worse. Caldwell's army was taking massive casualties, but they weren't breaking. The Lord himself had pushed to the front, fighting like a demon, rallying his troops with sheer presence. He was good, better than she'd expected, and his soldiers were loyal, willing to die for him. This wasn't going to be clean. "My queen," Kael said urgently, "they're bringing up siege equipment, trying to clear the narrows with rams." "They can't fit rams through that gap," Elira said. "They're trying anyway." She watched as Caldwell's forces dragged forward a massive battering ram, using it like a wedge to push through the pike formations. It was desperate, brutal, and it was working. The pike line started to bend. "Send in the reserves," she ordered. "Hold that line." Dara's city guard rushed forward, reinforcing the failing center. The battle devolved into chaos, formations dissolving into individual duels, strategy giving way to pure survival. And through it all, Caldwell kept coming. He was targeting the ridge now, sending units up the slopes to take out the archers. Elira watched them climb, saw her archers pick them off one by one, but there were too many. They'd reach the top eventually. "We need to pull back," Kael said. "Regroup at secondary positions." "Not yet." Elira's voice was ice. "We hold until Caldwell commits his entire force. Once he's in the valley, we collapse the exits. That'll trap us too." "I know." Kael stared at her. "You're going to sacrifice our retreat? I'm going to win." She met his eyes. "Trust me." For a moment, the general looked at her like he was seeing someone new. Someone harder. Someone dangerous. Then he nodded and moved to relay orders. Elira turned back to the battle, watching Caldwell's forces pour into the valley like water into a funnel. Almost there. Almost committed. Just a little more. And then she saw him. Caldwell himself, pushing through the chaos, eyes locked on the ridge. On her. He'd spotted her, recognized her somehow, and he was coming. She drew the borrowed sword, feeling its weight. She'd never been a fighter, had no training, no skill. But she'd be damned if she ran. Caldwell reached the ridge, soldiers flanking him, and stopped 10 feet from where Elira stood. Up close, he was even more imposing. 6.5 feet of muscle and fury, face scarred from a dozen battles, eyes cold as winter. "Queen Elira," he said, voice like gravel. The burden herself. "Lord Caldwell." She kept her sword raised. "Come to finish what Seraphine started?" He smiled, sharp and cruel. Seraphine was a tool. Useful, but ultimately replaceable. You, though, you're the real problem. Alaric's competent wife, holding together a kingdom that should have collapsed years ago. Flattering, not flattery. Strategy. He moved closer, his soldiers spreading out to cut off escape routes. "I've been planning this for 2 years, and every time I thought I had an opening, you closed it. Every weakness I tried to exploit, you'd already shored up. You're the reason this kingdom hasn't eaten itself alive, which means you're the reason I haven't already won. So you're here to remove the obstacle. I'm here to make you an offer." Caldwell's smile widened. "Join me. Use that competence for a regime that'll actually value it. I'll make you a power behind my throne, give you real authority, real respect, everything Alaric denied you." Elira laughed. It surprised her how genuine it sounded. "You think I survived 12 years of humiliation just to bend the knee to another man's ambition? You think I'm that hungry for validation? I think you're smart enough to see which way the wind's blowing." Here's the thing about men who mistake competence for availability. They think every capable woman is just waiting for the right man to recognize her value, like we're all auditioning for roles in someone else's story. They don't understand that competence isn't performed for approval. It's how you survive when nobody's watching. It's how you build power in shadows, because the light is reserved for people born into it. Caldwell looked at her and saw a tool he could use, a resource he could claim. He didn't see a woman who'd spent 12 years learning how to dismantle kingdoms piece by piece, who'd just lured his entire army into a valley with no exits because she was done surviving and ready to win. She smiled at Caldwell, cold and certain. "I think you're about to learn what happens when you underestimate the wrong queen." She raised her hand, gave the signal. The valley exits collapsed, not literally, but functionally. Fresh troops, hidden in the forest beyond the valley, sealed off the retreat routes with pike walls and archer fire. Caldwell's army was trapped, surrounded, caught in a killing box with nowhere to run. Caldwell's face went pale. I told you," Elira said softly. "I'm done being underestimated." The battle turned into a slaughter. Caldwell's forces, realizing they were trapped, fought with desperate fury. But desperation isn't strategy. The valley became a graveyard, bodies piling in the mud, screams echoing off stone. Caldwell fought like a demon, trying to carve a path to Elira, but Kael and a dozen soldiers intercepted him. The duel was vicious, brutal, and when it ended, Caldwell was on his knees, sword gone, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Elira approached slowly, looked down at the man who'd tried to take her kingdom. "Yield," she said. Caldwell spat blood. "Go to hell. Already there." She looked at Kael. "Take him alive. I want him to stand trial." As they dragged Caldwell away, Elira turned to survey the valley. Her valley. Her victory. Her mountain of corpses. The cost of winning hit her like a physical blow. Hundreds dead. Maybe more. Good soldiers who'd trusted her strategy, followed her orders, died because she'd made the call to fight here, to trap them all in this killing ground. The ghosts were already gathering, but the kingdom would survive. That was the math. That was the choice. And Queen Elira Vale had learned to own her choices. Buket. They returned to the capital at sunset, battered and bloody, but victorious. Word had spread. The streets were lined with people cheering, throwing flowers, calling her name. Not Alaric's name. Hers. Elira rode at the head of the column, spine straight despite exhaustion, face blank despite the turmoil churning in her gut. She'd won. She'd saved the kingdom, and she'd proven, beyond any doubt, that she was the power holding everything together. The question now was what to do with that power. Alaric waited in the throne room. He stood when she entered, face a mask of complicated emotions. Relief, fear, something that might have been pride or might have been resentment. "You did it," he said. "I did." She stopped 10 feet away. "Caldwell's in chains, his army's scattered. The rebellion is over. Thanks to you." "Yes. Thanks to me." She let the words sit. Let him feel them. "Elira, Alaric stopped, seemed to gather himself. "The council wants to honor you. A formal ceremony. Public recognition of your role in saving the kingdom." "How generous of them." Her voice was flat. 12 years I've been working for this kingdom, and now they want to honor me because I had to save them from their own stupidity. You have every right to be angry." "Angry doesn't cover it, Alaric." She moved closer. "I'm done. Done with being the competent wife. Done with fixing problems you create. Done with watching you sit on a throne I'm holding up." "What are you saying?" She looked at him, really looked, and saw a man who'd finally understood what he'd lost. But understanding wasn't enough. Regret wasn't enough. "I'm saying things change now. Either I get real power, real authority, real voice in this kingdom, or I walk away and let you hold up your own damn throne. The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke. Alaric's face worked through emotions, pride wrestling with fear, ego fighting with necessity. Finally, he spoke. What do you want? Everything you promised me 12 years ago, she said. Partnership. Respect. To be seen as more than just the plain wife doing the work behind the scenes. I want a voice in the council that can't be overruled. I want acknowledgement that this kingdom survives because of me, and I want you to never, ever make me feel invisible again. And if I refuse, then you'll lose me. And we both know what happens to this kingdom without me holding it together. Understanding the moment when everything shifts is like watching ice crack. You can see the fractures spreading, hear the groan of structure giving way, feel the inevitability of what comes next. Alaric stood at the epicenter of a kingdom that had just realized its real power didn't sit on the throne, and he had to choose whether to share that power or lose it entirely. The crown didn't make him king. The woman he'd dismissed as a burden made him king, and she'd just told him the price of keeping her. Alaric looked at his wife, the woman he'd married for alliance, the woman he'd stopped seeing years ago, the woman who'd just saved his kingdom and was now telling him she'd walk away if he didn't change. Done, he said finally. Whatever you want, whatever you need, it's yours. Elira studied him, looking for the catch, the lie, the trap. But all she saw was a broken man who'd finally learned humility the hard way. I'll have Master Chen draw up the documents, she said. Full partnership. Legal authority equal to yours. Public acknowledgement. Everything in writing, witnessed by the council. Agreed. And Alaric? She moved closer, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. If you ever betray me again, if you ever make me fight for scraps of respect in my own kingdom, I won't save you next time. I'll watch you burn and walk away without looking back. I understand. She turned and walked out, leaving him standing alone in his throne room. Outside, Kael was waiting. My queen, the council wants to meet. Of course they do. She didn't slow down. Tell them I'll meet with them tomorrow. Tonight, I need rest. She made it to her chambers, closed the door, and finally let herself feel it. The exhaustion, the grief, the weight of every ghost she'd created today. She'd won. She'd saved the kingdom. She'd forced her husband to acknowledge her worth. But victory tasted like ash and blood. Mara appeared with wine, set it on the table without a word. Elira looked at it for a long moment, then poured a glass and drank deep. Tomorrow, she'd be Queen Elira Vale, the woman who saved a kingdom, the legend they'd underestimate never again. But tonight, she was just a woman who'd spent 12 years fighting to be seen and had finally, brutally, carved out her own visibility with steel and strategy and the lives of soldiers who'd trusted her. The price of power, she was learning, was paid in pieces of yourself you could never get back. She finished the wine and poured another. Batsek. 3 days later, Master Chen appeared in her study with a face like stone. My queen, we have a problem. Elira looked up from documents. What now? Caldwell. He escaped. The words landed like ice water. Impossible. He was in the dungeons under triple guard. Was. Chen's jaw tightened. Someone helped him. We found 3 guards dead, locks broken from the inside, and Caldwell gone. He had help from inside the palace. Elira's mind raced. Who? We're still investigating. But my queen, there's more. Chen set a letter on her desk. This was found in his cell. She opened it, read the words written in Caldwell's harsh scrawl. This isn't over, Queen Elira. You won a battle. But the war? The war just started. And next time I'll come for you specifically. Every person you trust, every ally you've built, every piece of power you've claimed, I'll dismantle it all. You humiliated me, made me kneel. That's a debt paid in blood. See you soon. Caldwell. Elira read it twice, then looked at Chen. How long has he been gone? 12 hours. Maybe more. He could be anywhere by now. She stood, moved to the window, looked out over the capital, over the kingdom she'd saved, the kingdom that still had enemies embedded in its walls, that still had people willing to betray everything for power. She'd thought winning the battle would end it, but all she'd done was paint a target on her back. And somewhere out there, a man she'd humiliated was building an army with one purpose: destroying her specifically. The game wasn't over, it was just beginning. And this time, it was personal. The palace felt different after Caldwell's escape. Elira walked its corridors with new eyes, seeing threats in every shadow, calculating loyalty in every face that passed. The servants moved differently around her now, some with respect, others with something harder to name. Fear, maybe, or calculation. She'd become powerful enough to matter, which meant she'd become powerful enough to be worth betraying. 3 guards dead. Locks broken from the inside. Someone had wanted Caldwell free badly enough to murder for it. And that someone was still here, walking these halls, breathing this air, waiting for their next opportunity. Trust, Elira was learning, was a luxury she could no longer afford. She'd ordered Chen to investigate everyone. Every guard who'd been on duty that night, every servant with access to the dungeon levels, every noble who'd expressed even mild sympathy for Caldwell's cause. The interrogations had been going for 2 days, and so far, they'd found nothing. Whoever had helped him was good at covering tracks. Or they were someone nobody would think to question. Elira stood in her study, staring at a map of the kingdom marked with red pins showing Caldwell's known supporters. The network was larger than she'd expected, spreading through 3 provinces like roots under stone. Cut off one branch and 2 more appeared. This wasn't just rebellion, it was infection. My queen. Mara entered carrying tea, set it down with practiced efficiency. The council is waiting. Let them wait. Elira didn't look up. I'm tired of performing for men who only respect me because I saved their comfortable lives. Mara hesitated. If I may, Your Majesty, they're afraid of you now. That's different from respect, but it's useful. Elira glanced at the woman who'd served her for 8 years. When did you get so cynical? Around the time I watched you stop apologizing for taking up space. Mara's smile was small but genuine. It's a good look on you. After she left, Elira drank the tea and considered the observation. Fear was useful, but fear bred resentment, and resentment bred betrayal. She was walking a razor's edge between authority and tyranny, and one misstep would send her tumbling into the same trap that had caught Alaric. Power without wisdom is just violence waiting to happen. Elira had watched her husband wield power like a club, demanding obedience without earning loyalty, mistaking compliance for respect. It had made him weak, made him vulnerable to people like Seraphine, who understood that real power lives in the space between what people say and what they mean, between the smile and the knife. Elira was learning to read that space, to navigate it, but she was also learning how easily you could lose yourself there, how quickly you could become the thing you'd fought against. She straightened her shoulders and headed for the council chamber. The council rose when she entered, all of them, even Lord Peter, the ancient treasurer who'd been serving since before she was born. The gesture was new, calculated. They were acknowledging her power while subtly reminding her they could withdraw that acknowledgement. Politics was exhausting. Elira took her seat at Alaric's right hand. The king looked tired, older somehow, like the weight of his mistakes was finally visible in the lines around his eyes. He nodded to her. A small gesture, but public. Another acknowledgement. We've received word from the northern provinces, Lord Vance began. He was a stocky man with intelligent eyes and a talent for presenting bad news like it was optional. 3 lords have pledged renewed loyalty after your victory over Caldwell. Only 3? Elira's voice was flat. We have 7 northern lords. Where are the other 4? Vance shifted uncomfortably. Silent. For now. Silent means calculating, Elira said. Trying to decide if backing me is worth the risk. She looked around the table. What are we doing to tip that calculation in our favor? We could offer concessions, another counselor suggested. Lower taxes, trade benefits, bribes, Elira translated. You want to reward their hesitation with gifts. It's diplomacy, the man protested. It's weakness. She leaned forward. We just crushed a rebellion. Now is not the time to negotiate from a position of fear. We show strength, make examples of disloyalty, and celebrate those who stood firm. Examples, Lord Peter said carefully. You mean executions. I mean consequences. Elira met his eyes. Caldwell's supporters helped him escape. They murdered guards. That's treason. So yes, if by examples you mean justice, then yes. The room went quiet. This was the line, the moment where she either backed down or became someone harder. Someone willing to spill blood to hold power. Alaric cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. Elira didn't look at him. This affects the entire council. Everyone here needs to understand what we're facing. Caldwell escaped because someone in this palace helped him. Someone we trust. Someone who might be in this room right now. The accusation landed like a grenade. Counselors shifted, exchanged glances, tried to look anywhere but at each other. That's a serious charge, Vance said slowly. It's reality. Elira stood, placed her hands flat on the table. So here's what's going to happen. Master Chen is investigating everyone. And I mean everyone. If you have nothing to hide, cooperate. If you obstruct, you become suspect. And if you're found guilty of aiding Caldwell, I will personally ensure you hang. Your Majesty, Peter's voice was strained. This kind of paranoia will tear the court apart. The court is already torn apart. I'm just acknowledging it. She looked at each of them in turn. Caldwell promised to come for me specifically, to dismantle everything I've built, which means anyone helping him is working to destroy me. And I will not be destroyed by cowards hiding behind false loyalty. Understanding the psychology of a room turning against you is like feeling temperature drop before a storm. You can sense it in the silence, in the way people avoid eye contact, in the subtle shift of bodies putting distance between themselves and the source of discomfort. Elira could feel it now. The council pulling back from her, reassessing, wondering if the competent queen who'd saved them was becoming a tyrant who'd destroy them. Fear was useful, but too much fear made people desperate. And desperate people did stupid, dangerous things. She'd pushed too hard, shown too much of the anger burning in her chest, but she couldn't take it back now without looking weak. This meeting is over, she said. Chen will begin interviews tomorrow. Be ready. She walked out before anyone could respond, feeling their stares like knives in her back. Alaric caught up with her 3 corridors away. Elira, wait. She stopped, didn't turn. What? That was too aggressive. You've made them afraid of you. Good. Fear keeps people honest. No. He moved in front of her, forced her to meet his eyes. Fear makes people unpredictable, makes them plot in shadows. You're creating the very conspiracy you're trying to prevent. Then what do you suggest? She heard the bitterness in her own voice. Smile and pretend everything's fine while Caldwell builds an army to destroy us? Trust people who might be planning to stab me in my sleep? I'm suggesting you remember that power without allies is just a target. Alaric's voice was softer than she'd heard in months. You're so focused on being strong that you're forgetting to be strategic. Strength without support is isolation, and isolated leaders don't last. The words hit harder than she wanted to admit. Because he was right. She'd been so busy proving she couldn't be dismissed that she'd started dismissing everyone else, building walls instead of bridges, becoming exactly the kind of ruler she'd despised. I don't know how to do both, she admitted quietly. How to be strong and trusted. Every time I try to be open, someone uses it against me. That's leadership. Alaric's smile was sad. Welcome to the throne. It's lonely up here. They stood in the corridor, 2 people who'd once loved each other, now bound together by duty and desperation and the weight of a kingdom neither of them could hold alone. Help me, Elira said finally. Show me how to build alliances without appearing weak. Alaric nodded. We start by apologizing to the council. Absolutely not. Elira. I won't grovel to men who've spent 12 years treating me like furniture. Not groveling. Explaining. She saw him searching for words. You're scared. They're scared. Everyone's scared, so you bring them in. Show them you trust them by asking for their help instead of demanding their obedience. And if one of them is the traitor, then we're already dead, so it doesn't matter. Alaric's expression hardened. But if none of them are, and you keep treating them like enemies, you'll create traitors where none existed. The logic was sound. Infuriating, but sound. Elira wanted to reject it, to hold on to the armor she'd built, but she could feel it cracking under the weight of isolation. Fine, she said. Tomorrow. I'll speak to them tomorrow. Ak. The next morning brought worse news. Chen arrived at her chambers before dawn, face ashen. My queen, we have a problem. Elira was already awake, had barely slept. Show me. He spread documents across her desk. Financial records, correspondence, coded messages. It took her a moment to understand what she was seeing. Then the horror landed. Someone's been embezzling from the treasury, Chen said quietly. For months. Maybe longer. Siphoning funds through false contracts, phantom suppliers, ghost expenses. The money's gone to accounts we've traced to Caldwell's network. How much? Enough to fund a small army, enough to bribe border guards, buy weapons, finance an entire rebellion. Elira's stomach turned. Who? That's the problem. The records point to someone with high-level access, someone who understands the treasury systems intimately. Chen paused. Someone on the council. The room tilted. One of her advisors, someone she'd been working with for years. Someone who'd sat in meetings, offered counsel, pretended loyalty while bleeding the kingdom dry to fund its destruction. Do we have a name? Her voice was barely controlled. 3 possibilities. Chen pointed to names on the document. Lord Vance, Lord Finch, or Commander Dara. Elira read the names and felt something break inside. Vance had been her ally for 5 years. Finch had helped her navigate the treasury's complexities since she'd become queen. Dara had fought beside her in the valley, had bled for the kingdom. One of them was a traitor. Maybe all 3. Are you certain? She asked. The evidence is clear. Whoever's doing this knew exactly how to hide it. They've been careful, deliberate. This isn't opportunistic theft. It's systematic betrayal. Elira looked at the documents until the numbers blurred. 12 years she'd spent building trust, earning loyalty, believing that competence and service would create real bonds. And now she was staring at proof that loyalty was just another commodity, that people would smile to your face and destroy you behind your back if the price was right. Bring them in, she said. All 3, separately. I want to look them in the eyes when I ask them. Lord Vance came first. He entered her study with the easy confidence of a man who'd never questioned his position. Took the offered seat, smiled politely, waited. Elira didn't waste time. We've discovered embezzlement from the treasury. Large amounts. Funneled to Caldwell's supporters. His expression shifted. Shock, concern, all the right reactions. That's terrible. Do we know who? You tell me. She pushed the financial documents across the desk. Your signature is on half these authorizations. Vance picked them up, scanned them, and she watched his face carefully, looking for tells. For the moment guilty people always had when confronted with evidence. But Vance just looked confused. These are legitimate expenses. Grain purchases for the northern garrisons, equipment repairs, standard allocations. He met her eyes. Your Majesty, I don't understand. Someone altered the records. Made it look like standard expenses when the money actually went elsewhere. And you're one of 3 people with the access to do it. I would never. His voice held genuine hurt. My queen, I've served this kingdom my entire life. My father served before me. The idea that I would betray everything I've built is insane. People betray for many reasons, Elira said. Money, power, fear, revenge. Pick your poison. Not me. Vance leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. You saved this kingdom. You saved me personally when my estates were threatened by border raids. I owe you everything. Why would I destroy the person who gave me a future? The question hung there, and Elira realized she didn't have an answer. Vance had more to lose than gain from her fall, unless he was playing a deeper game than she could see. You're dismissed, she said, but don't leave the palace. After he left, she sat in silence, trying to read the interaction. He'd seemed genuine, but good liars always did. Yeah, Finch was next. The nervous treasurer practically vibrated with anxiety as he took his seat. My queen, he started before she could speak. I heard you're investigating embezzlement. I want to help. Whatever you need. I need to know if you've been stealing from your own treasury. The color drained from his face. What? No. Never. I would never. Someone did. Elira watched him carefully. Someone with your level of access. Someone who understands the systems well enough to hide it. I swear on my life, Finch's hands trembled. I've done nothing wrong. Yes, I have access. Yes, I understand the systems. But I've spent 20 years protecting this kingdom's finances. I've lost sleep over budget shortfalls and tax disputes. I've agonized over every allocation. The idea that I would sabotage my own work is madness. Then explain these. She showed him the same documents. Finch studied them with the intensity of a man whose life depended on finding answers. And slowly, his expression changed. My queen, these authorizations, they're formatted wrong. What do you mean? He pointed to signature blocks, date stamps, reference codes. The formatting protocol changed 6 months ago. New security measures to prevent exactly this kind of fraud. But these documents are using the old format, which means whoever created them either didn't know about the changes or didn't have access to the current templates. Elira leaned forward. Keep going. I'm the one who implemented the new protocols. Anyone in my department would know the current format, but someone working from old records, old access, someone who hasn't been actively involved in the Treasury for months, they'd make exactly these mistakes. So you're saying this is someone who used to have access but doesn't anymore, or someone working from stolen credentials. Finch's fear was transforming into professional focus. My queen, if you give me access to the full audit trail, I can trace exactly when these transactions occurred and cross-reference them with who was logged into the systems at those times. Do it. She felt a flicker of hope. And Finch? If you're lying to me, if this is an elaborate cover, I will know. And you will regret it. I understand. He stood, gathering the documents. I'll have answers by tonight. Dara was last. The commander sat across from Elira with the same steady calm she'd shown in battle. Didn't fidget, didn't protest, just waited. You know why you're here, Elira said. I can guess. Someone's been funding Caldwell. You're investigating everyone with access. I'm on the list. Are you guilty? Dara's laugh was sharp. If I were, I'd be halfway to the border by now, not sitting here waiting for you to execute me. She leaned back, eyes hard. But let's be honest. You don't trust anyone right now. You're looking at every person who's ever had authority and wondering if they're the knife in your back. So no, I'm not guilty. But I don't expect you to believe me. Elira studied the woman who'd fought beside her, who'd held the line when Caldwell's forces threatened to break through, who'd looked her in the eyes and said, I'm willing when asked to spend lives. Why are you still here? Elira asked. You could have run, could have disappeared, but you stayed. Because I'm not a coward. Dara's voice was iron. And because if you're going to execute me for crimes I didn't commit, I want to look you in the eyes when you do it. Want you to remember my face every time you wonder if you became the thing you fought against. The words landed like a slap. Elira felt the truth of them, the weight of what she'd become in just 3 days. Paranoid, aggressive, treating loyal people like criminals because she couldn't tell the difference anymore. What happens when you stop being able to trust your own judgment? When the world has betrayed you so thoroughly that you can't distinguish between ally and enemy? When every smile might be false, every gesture might be manipulation, every word might be poison wrapped in honey. You become the thing you hate. You become the tyrant who sees threats everywhere because you've forgotten what loyalty looks like. You start treating people like pieces on a board instead of human beings making their own choices in an impossible situation. And somewhere in that transformation, you lose the thing that made you worth following in the first place. I don't want to become that person, Elira said quietly. The one who can't trust anyone, who sees enemies in every shadow. Then don't. Dara's expression softened slightly. Look, you've been through hell. Your husband betrayed you. His mistress sold you out. The kingdom you saved is fracturing. And now someone close to you is actively working to destroy you. You have every right to be paranoid, but paranoia isn't the same as wisdom. And executing loyal people won't make you safer. How do I tell the difference? You don't. Not with certainty. Dara stood. But you make your best guess and you live with the consequences. That's what leadership is. Choosing who to trust knowing you might be wrong. After Dara left, Elira sat alone with the weight of impossible choices. 3 suspects. 3 people who could be guilty or innocent. 3 lives in her hands with no clear path to truth. The knock on her door came an hour later. Finch, carrying more documents, face grave. I found it, he said. The pattern. The person who accessed the Treasury systems during every suspicious transaction. His hand shook as he laid out the evidence. My queen, I'm so sorry. Elira looked at the name on the document, felt the world tilt sideways, felt everything she thought she knew shatter like glass. No, she whispered. That's not possible. The evidence is clear. Finch's voice was heavy with grief. I checked 3 times, cross-referenced every entry. It's definitive. The name staring back at her was impossible, unthinkable. Someone who'd been with her from the beginning. Someone she'd trusted absolutely. Someone who'd saved her life and earned her loyalty through years of service. Mara, her maid, her confidant, the woman who'd brought her wine during the worst nights, who'd whispered encouragement when the court treated her like garbage, who'd stood beside her through 12 years of humiliation and triumph. Mara had been embezzling for Caldwell, had been the traitor all along. The evidence was devastating. Access logs showing Mara entering the Treasury offices during hours she should have been attending Elira. Financial transfers authorized using stolen credentials traced back to Mara's quarters. Correspondence found hidden in her chambers detailing payments and instructions from Caldwell's network. And the final piece, the guards who'd died the night of Caldwell's escape. All 3 had been lured to their posts by messages supposedly from the Queen, messages delivered by her personal maid. Elira read the evidence until the words burned into her brain. Then she stood, walked to her chambers, and found Mara preparing her evening clothes. The woman looked up with her familiar smile. My queen, I was just laying out your dinner attire. The blue or the green? Elira stared at her, at the face she'd trusted, the person she'd confided in, the woman who'd betrayed her more thoroughly than anyone. Why? The word came out broken. Mara's smile didn't falter. My queen? Don't. Elira's voice hardened. Don't pretend. I know everything. The embezzlement, the escape, all of it. So just tell me why. For a moment, Mara just stood there. Then something shifted in her expression. The warmth drained away, replaced by something colder, harder. Because you were never going to win, she said simply. You're smart, competent, strong, but this kingdom was never going to let you be more than the plain queen doing the work. So when Caldwell offered me a future in a regime that would actually value my skills instead of treating me like furniture, I took it. You were my friend. I was your servant. Mara's voice was flat. And servants don't have friends. We have employers. People who use us and discard us when we're no longer useful. You're not special, Elira. You're just another noble who thought kindness was the same as equality. The words cut deeper than any blade, because there was truth in them. Elira had never thought about Mara's future beyond her service, had never considered that the woman might have ambitions, dreams, resentments of her own. She'd taken the loyalty for granted, assumed it was given freely, never questioned what might drive someone to betray. I trusted you, Elira said. That was your mistake. Mara moved toward the door, but guards were already there, blocking her exit. You think you're different from Alaric because you're competent instead of beautiful. But you're the same. You use people and call it partnership. You demand loyalty without offering real connection. You're just another ruler playing games with lives that don't matter to you. You helped murder 3 guards. They were in the way. Mara's expression didn't change. This kingdom is rotting from the inside. Caldwell's going to burn it down and build something new. Something where competence actually matters more than bloodlines. Where people like me don't have to spend our lives serving people like you. So you chose him. Chose to destroy everything rather than try to fix it. I chose survival. Mara smiled, cold and certain. You'll understand soon enough. When Caldwell comes for you, when everyone you trust turns out to be using you, when you're alone in the ruins of everything you built, you'll understand that loyalty is a fairy tale. Power is the only thing that matters. The guards took her away. Elira stood in her chambers, surrounded by clothes Mara had chosen, furniture Mara had arranged, 12 years of small kindnesses that had all been lies. She'd been betrayed by her husband, by his mistress, by nobles and advisors, and now by the one person she'd thought was truly on her side. The isolation was complete, absolute, crushing. And somewhere in the darkness, Caldwell was laughing. The trial was swift. Mara confessed to everything. Embezzlement, conspiracy, accessory to murder. She stood before the court and detailed her crimes with the same efficient competence she'd once brought to Elira's service. The council demanded execution. The law was clear. Treason meant death. Elira sat on her throne and listened to them debate the method. Hanging, beheading, public or private, like they were discussing whether instead of ending a life. When they finally turned to her for judgment, she looked at Mara standing in chains, saw the woman who'd brought her wine on the worst nights, who'd whispered that the staff remembered her kindness, who'd been planning her destruction the entire time. Exile, Elira said. The court erupted. Protests. Objections. Arguments that mercy was weakness, that traitors needed to hang as examples. But Elira's voice cut through the chaos. She'll be stripped of all possessions and escorted to the border. If she ever returns, she'll be executed on sight. But I won't kill her. Your Majesty, Vance protested, the law demands. The law is mine to interpret. Elira's voice was ice. And I will not become the kind of ruler who executes people to prove a point. Exile. Final. Understanding the moment when you choose who you are is like standing at a crossroads in fog. Every direction looks the same. Every choice seems impossible. But you have to pick one and live with it forever. Elira could kill Mara, could watch her hang and feel nothing, could become the hard, merciless ruler fear demanded. Or she could choose mercy, could refuse to let betrayal turn her into something she'd hate, could hold on to the belief that power without humanity was just tyranny wearing a crown. Neither choice was right, neither was wrong, but one of them was who she wanted to be, and the other was who Caldwell wanted her to become. Mara was taken away. The court dispersed, whispering about weakness and foolish mercy. Alaric approached slowly. That was either the wisest thing you've ever done or the most naive. I don't know which, Elira admitted, but I know I'm not willing to kill someone just to prove I can, even when they betrayed you. Especially then. She looked at him. Because if I start killing everyone who betrays me, where does it stop? You? The council? Anyone who's ever doubted me? I become the monster to prevent the monster, and the kingdom burns either way. Alaric studied her for a long moment. You're stronger than me. No. Just tired of becoming what I hate. That night, Chen came to her with final reports. We've swept the entire palace. Found 3 more of Caldwell's agents, all servants, all in positions where they could observe and report. They're in custody. Execute them, Elira said flatly. Chen blinked. My queen? They're soldiers, spies. That's different from Mara. She was someone I knew, someone who made a choice. But trained agents embedded in my palace? That's an act of war. Execute them publicly. Let Caldwell know what happens to his spies. Understood. Chen hesitated. And Caldwell himself? We've tracked him to the eastern mountains. He's building forces. Not large yet, but growing. How long before he's ready to move? Weeks. Maybe a month. Then we have time. Elira stood, moved to the window. Time to shore up alliances. Time to rebuild trust. Time to prepare for the war that's coming. And if we're not ready, then we die. She said it without emotion. Simple fact. Caldwell's not playing for territory anymore. This is personal. He wants me destroyed specifically. So either I destroy him first, or everything ends. Chen bowed and left. Elira stood alone in the darkness, looking out over her kingdom. The kingdom she'd saved. The kingdom that was tearing itself apart. The kingdom she'd have to save again if she wanted to survive. But survival wasn't enough anymore. She'd spent 12 years surviving. Being dismissed, being underestimated, being treated like a burden while she held everything together. Now she needed to win. Not just battles, not just political games, but the war for her own soul. The fight to remain human while wielding power, to stay herself while becoming someone strong enough to survive, because Caldwell was coming. And this time, it wouldn't be armies clashing in valleys. It would be personal, intimate. A test of who she'd become and whether that person was worth saving. The question was whether she'd recognize herself when it was over. Tats. The message arrived 3 days later, delivered by a merchant who claimed to have found it nailed to a tree on the eastern road. Addressed to Queen Elira Vale in Caldwell's harsh scrawl. She opened it alone in her study, read the words that would change everything. You think mercy makes you strong. You think sparing my agents proves you're different, but all you've proven is that you're weak. A real leader would have killed them all, would have burned my supporters out of their homes and mounted their heads on spikes. Instead, you exile one traitor and execute a few spies. Half measures from a woman playing at power. So let me teach you what real power looks like. I have your husband. The word stopped her heart. Took him 3 nights ago from his chambers. Your guards didn't even notice he was gone until morning, too busy watching for external threats to see the knife already inside your walls. He's alive, for now. Comfortable even. And he'll stay that way as long as you do exactly what I say. Here are your options. You can try to rescue him. Send your armies to storm my stronghold. Kill a few hundred of your soldiers in the attempt. Maybe even succeed. Or you can give me what I want. You, alone, unarmed. Come to me and I'll release him. 1 life for 1 life. The incompetent king for the competent queen. Seems like a fair trade. You have 2 days to decide. After that, I start sending pieces of him back to you. A finger first, then an ear. Then more interesting parts. I wonder how many pieces it'll take before you realize mercy is just cowardice wearing a prettier face. Come alone or watch your husband die slowly. Your choice. But choose quickly. The mountain pass at Raven's Gate. 2 days. Dawn. Looking forward to our reunion. Caldwell. Elira read the letter 3 times, then once more, then set it down with hands that wanted to shake but wouldn't let themselves. Alaric was gone, had been gone for 3 days, and she hadn't even noticed. Too busy investigating betrayals and rebuilding defenses and trying to hold together a kingdom that was crumbling faster than she could patch it. Her husband, the man she'd loved, the man who'd called her a burden, the man who'd finally started to understand what he'd lost. Gone, taken, held hostage by a monster who knew exactly how to break her. The choice was impossible. Go to Caldwell and die. Let him torture Alaric until there was nothing left. Send armies and watch hundreds die with no guarantee of success. No good options, just variations of loss. She stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the kingdom she'd fought so hard to save. The kingdom that had never really been hers, that had only acknowledged her when forced to, that would probably celebrate if she disappeared and Alaric came back broken but alive. Why should she save him? After everything he'd done, everything he'd failed to do. Why throw herself into the void for a man who'd thrown her away? Because mercy isn't about deserving. It's about choosing who you are when no one's watching. When the easy choice is cruelty and the hard choice is compassion. Elira had spent 12 years being strong, being competent, being everything her kingdom needed. Now she had to decide if she'd also be good, if she'd save a man who'd never really saved her, if she'd walk into death for someone who'd barely lived for her. The math didn't work. The logic failed. The strategic choice was to let Alaric die and preserve herself. But strategy wasn't the same as humanity. And if she lost her humanity, Caldwell won regardless. She called for Chen. The spy master arrived within minutes. Assemble a rescue team, she said. Best fighters, best trackers. We're going to Raven's Gate. My queen, that's suicide. It's obviously a trap. I know. She met his eyes. But we're doing it anyway. And if it fails, then I want you to take command of the kingdom's defense. Make sure whoever comes after me is someone who will actually protect these people. She handed him a sealed letter. My contingency orders. If I don't return, open it. Chen took the letter with grave hands. This is madness. Probably. But it's my madness. And I'm tired of making the smart choice that costs me pieces of my soul. She straightened her shoulders. We leave at nightfall. Tell no one where we're going. As Chen left to prepare, Elira stood alone in her study and felt the weight of the choice settling into her bones. She was walking into Caldwell's trap, was probably going to die, was sacrificing everything she'd built for a man who'd built nothing for her, but she was doing it anyway, because the alternative was becoming the monster, and she'd had enough of monsters. If she was going to fall, she'd fall as herself, not as what Caldwell wanted her to become. The game had changed. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about who she'd be in the losing, and Queen Elira Vale had finally decided that mercy, even foolish mercy, was worth more than power bought with cruelty. She just hoped she'd live long enough to see if she was right. The rescue team assembled in silence. 15 soldiers. Chen had handpicked them from units that had fought in the valley against Caldwell, veterans who'd seen blood and hadn't broken. Men and women who understood that this mission wasn't about glory or victory. It was about walking into hell and hoping to walk back out. Elira watched them prepare in the armory, checking weapons, tightening straps on leather armor, moving with the efficient calm of people who'd accepted they might die. General Kael stood among them, face carved from stone, refusing to meet her eyes because they both knew she'd ordered him to stay behind and he'd ignored her. "You should have remained at the capital," she said quietly. "You should have ordered someone else to lead this suicide mission." His voice was flat. "But here we are. Here we are." They rode out at midnight through a servant's gate, no fanfare, no witnesses, just shadows peeling away from the palace into darkness. The city slept behind them, unaware that its queen was riding toward probable death to save a king who'd never deserved her. The mountain pass at Raven's Gate was 2 days hard riding northeast. Caldwell had chosen the location deliberately. Remote, defensible, perfect for an ambush. He'd be waiting with forces hidden in the rocks, ready to spring the trap the moment Elira arrived. She knew this. They all knew this. And they rode anyway. Because sometimes the trap is the only path forward. Sometimes you walk into the blade knowing it's there because the alternative is standing still while everything you care about dies around you. Strategy demands you avoid traps. Wisdom demands you recognize them. But leadership, real leadership, demands you occasionally step into them anyway because your people need to see that you'll bleed first, that you won't ask them to face what you won't face yourself. Elira had spent 12 years being strategic, being wise, making smart choices that cost her nothing but dignity. Now she was making the stupid choice, the human choice, the choice that said some things matter more than survival. They made camp the first night in a canyon 20 miles from the palace. No fires, cold rations, quiet conversations that died quickly in the dark. Chen approached as Elira checked her weapons for the 3rd time. "You should eat something. I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway." He handed her dried meat and bread. "You'll need strength tomorrow." She took the food mechanically, chewed without tasting. Around them, soldiers prepared for sleep in shifts, half watching the ridges while the other half tried to rest. Kael was organizing watch rotations with the precision of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. "Master Chen." Elira kept her voice low. "If I don't make it back, don't." His voice was sharp. "Don't say goodbye. It makes it real. It is real. We both know what we're walking into." Chen was silent for a moment, then, "When I first came to the palace 23 years ago, your husband's father was king. He was brilliant, ruthless, strong, everything a ruler should be. And he died alone, poisoned by his own paranoia, trusting no one. His expression was hidden in shadows. When you became queen, I watched you build something different. Loyalty earned instead of demanded, power through competence instead of fear. I thought maybe you'd break the cycle. And instead I'm walking into a trap to save a man who betrayed me." "No." Chen met her eyes. "You're walking into a trap because you refuse to become what this kingdom expects. A cold strategist who calculates lives like numbers. You're staying human despite everything trying to make you hard. That's not weakness. That's the only thing that makes this worth fighting for." The words settled in her chest, warm and painful. "Will you protect them? If I die, the kingdom will endure." Chen's voice was firm. "It always does. But it'll be colder without you. Meaner. More like what it was before. Then I guess I better not die." She managed to sleep 2 hours. Woke before dawn with her heart racing and sweat cold on her skin. Dreamed of Mara's face. Of Seraphine's laughter. Of Alaric calling her a burden while Caldwell watched and smiled. They rode at first light. The terrain grew rougher, rocks jutting from earth like broken bones, trees twisted by wind into shapes that looked like warnings. By noon, they'd entered the foothills. By evening, they could see Raven's Gate in the distance. It was exactly as bad as she'd expected. A narrow pass between 2 cliff faces, maybe 30 feet wide at the narrowest point. Perfect choke point, perfect kill zone. Rocks and ledges on both sides where archers could hide. No cover in the pass itself. No way through except straight into whatever Caldwell had waiting. Kael studied it through a spyglass, face grim. I count at least 40 soldiers visible, probably twice that hidden. He lowered the glass. If we go in there, we're not coming out. Elira took the spyglass, scanned the pass, and saw exactly what he saw. Death waiting in 100 forms, arrows, rock slides, soldiers with superior position and numbers. It was a massacre waiting to happen. But she also saw something else. A cave system on the northern cliff face. Old smuggler routes if the maps were accurate. Narrow, dangerous, but potentially a way to flank Caldwell's forces while he waited in the pass for her to walk into his trap. There, she pointed. Those caves. Where do they lead? Chen consulted maps, traced routes with a finger. They connect to a plateau above the pass. Would put us behind Caldwell's forces if we could reach it without being spotted. Big if. Cale's voice was skeptical. Those passages are unstable, could collapse at any moment. And if Caldwell has anyone watching them, we're trapped underground with nowhere to run. So we split up. Elira's mind raced through possibilities. I go into the pass with a small group, draw Caldwell's attention, make him think I'm surrendering like he demanded. The rest of you take the caves and hit him from behind when he's focused on me. That's suicide. You'll be alone in the kill zone. Not alone. She looked at the soldiers around her. I'll take 5. Enough to look like an escort, not enough to seem threatening. The rest go with Kyle through the caves. And when Caldwell realizes it's a trap, when he orders his archers to kill you, then you better move fast. Understanding the moment when you commit to a choice that will probably kill you is like standing on the edge of a cliff. You can see the drop, can feel the wind pulling at you, can imagine every way the fall will break you, but you jump anyway because the alternative is standing still forever, paralyzed by fear of what might happen. Elira had spent her entire life making safe choices, marrying for alliance, working in shadows, being competent enough to be useful, but not threatening enough to be noticed. She'd survived by being small, by not making waves, by accepting crumbs and calling them victories. But survival wasn't enough anymore. If she was going to die, she'd die standing tall. She'd die making noise. She'd die as someone who mattered instead of someone who was tolerated. The plan was desperate, reckless. Exactly the kind of thing Alaric would have done in his arrogant youth. The irony wasn't lost on her. They moved into position as darkness fell. Kyle took 10 soldiers into the cave system, disappearing into black tunnels with nothing but torches and prayer. Chen stayed with Elira, along with 4 soldiers, 2 women and 2 men, all veterans of the Valley battle. We go in at dawn, Elira said, when Caldwell's expecting me. We walk slow, hands visible, no weapons drawn. Make it look like surrender. And when he springs the trap? One of the soldiers asked. Young woman named Sarah with a scar across her cheekbone. We fight like hell and hope Kyle's faster than we are desperate. They spent the night in a shallow depression 200 yards from the pass entrance. No sleep, just waiting, watching stars wheel overhead, listening to wind howl through rocks like the mountain itself was mourning. Chen sat beside Elira, cleaning weapons that didn't need cleaning. Nervous habit. My queen, he said quietly. There's something I need to tell you. She looked at him. I'm the one who recommended Mara for your service 8 years ago. His voice was heavy with guilt. She came to me with excellent references, clean background, perfect credentials. I vetted her myself, thought she'd be ideal. You couldn't have known. I should have. It's my job to know. His hand stilled on the blade. I let a traitor into your household. Let her get close enough to destroy you. That failure is mine to carry. We all failed, Elira said. I trusted her. Alaric trusted Seraphine. The council trusted advisors who sold us out. Betrayal works because we want to believe people are better than they are. She looked at the stars. But that doesn't mean we stop trusting. It just means we trust more carefully. And if Caldwell's using Alaric as bait, if your husband's already dead and this is all theater, then I die having tried. Better than living knowing I didn't. Chen nodded slowly. You've changed. From the woman who married Alaric 12 years ago. Good. That woman was trying to be what everyone wanted. This woman knows what she is. And what's that? Dangerous. She smiled in the darkness. Turns out competence with a spine is terrifying to people who thought they could control me. Dawn broke cold and sharp. Elira stood, checked her armor one last time, and looked at her small team. 5 people against an army. 5 lives she was gambling on a desperate plan. 5 families who might lose someone today because she'd chosen mercy over strategy. "Ready?" she asked. They nodded. No speeches. No bravado. Just grim acceptance. They walked toward the pass as the sun climbed. Slow steps, hands away from weapons, looking exactly like a queen coming to surrender. The pass swallowed them like a throat. Cliffs rose on both sides, blocking the sun, turning morning into twilight. Elira's boots crunched on gravel. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Every shadow could hide an archer. Every rock could be the last thing she saw. They reached the center of the pass, stopped, waited, and Caldwell emerged from the shadows like a predator. He looked different from the battle, cleaner, almost noble in dark leather armor that fit him like it had been made for royalty. His soldiers filed out behind him, 30 visible, more in the rocks above. All armed, all watching. "Queen Elira." His voice echoed off stone. "I'm impressed. Didn't think you'd actually come." "Where's my husband?" Not a question. A demand. Caldwell smiled. Safe. Comfortable even. "I keep my word. Prove it." He gestured. Soldiers dragged Alaric forward. The king looked rough, bruised and filthy, but alive. His eyes found Elira's across the pass, and she saw relief and shame and fear tangled together. "Satisfied?" Caldwell asked. "Barely. Let him go. After we talk." Caldwell moved closer, closing the distance between them to 20 feet. "You know why you're here. You demanded I surrender myself. I demanded you face reality." He spread his arms. "Look around. I have you surrounded. I have your husband. I have supporters in your capital ready to rise the moment word of your death reaches them. This kingdom is mine. The only question is how much blood we spill making it official. And you think I'll just hand it over? Walk to my execution to spare lives? I think you're tired." Caldwell's voice was almost gentle. "Tired of fighting. Tired of being underestimated. Tired of holding together a kingdom that never appreciated you. I'm offering you peace. A quick death. Honorable even. In exchange, I let your soldiers live. Let your husband live. The kingdom transitions smoothly instead of drowning in civil war. You want me to surrender so you can murder me cleanly. I want you to accept the inevitable. You're brilliant, probably the smartest person in this entire kingdom. But brilliance isn't enough when the world's stacked against you. You've been fighting that truth your whole life. Time to stop." There's a seduction in surrender. In the idea that you can stop fighting, stop clawing for every inch, stop bleeding yourself dry, trying to hold everything together. It whispers that rest is possible if you just let go, that peace lives on the other side of giving up. Caldwell was offering her that seduction wrapped in logic. He'd positioned it as wisdom instead of defeat, made it sound like strength to acknowledge impossible odds instead of insanity to keep fighting them. And part of Elira, the part that had carried 12 years of humiliation and betrayal and grinding work, wanted to take it, wanted to close her eyes and let someone else carry the weight. But surrender was just another word for erasure, and she'd been erased enough. "No." The word came out hard as iron. Caldwell's expression flickered. "No? You want me to believe this is inevitable, that I should accept defeat gracefully? But here's what you don't understand." Elira took a step forward. "I've been accepting things my whole life, accepting that I wasn't beautiful enough, accepting whispers and dismissal and being treated like furniture, accepting that competence wasn't worth respect. And every time I accepted, I got smaller, quieter, more invisible. So no, Caldwell, I'm done accepting. If you want this kingdom, you'll have to take it from my cold, dead hands. And I promise you, I'll make that as expensive as possible. Brave words from a woman surrounded by my soldiers. Brave words from a woman who knows what she is." She smiled, sharp and dangerous. "You think I walked into your trap blind? You think I'm stupid enough to surrender myself without a backup plan?" Caldwell's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the 10 soldiers currently flanking your position from the cave system behind you." She watched his face change, watched understanding and fury war for dominance. "I'm talking about the fact that while you've been monologuing, they've been getting into position. And in about 30 seconds, this kill zone you built so carefully is going to turn into your graveyard, You're bluffing. Am I? And that's when the first arrow struck. It came from behind Caldwell's forces, punching through a soldier's throat before anyone could react. Then more. A volley from the plateau above, raining death onto men who'd been watching the pass instead of their backs. Kael's voice roared from the rocks. "For the Queen!" Chaos erupted. Caldwell's forces scattered, trying to respond to threats from multiple directions. Elira's small team drew weapons, no longer pretending surrender. Steel met steel with sounds like the world breaking. Elira ran for Alaric, ducked an arrow, dodged a sword thrust, reached the king and cut his bonds with a knife she'd hidden in her boot. "Can you fight?" she demanded. "Do I have a choice?" "No." She shoved a sword into his hands and turned to face Caldwell. The Lord was pushing through the chaos toward her, murder in his eyes, sword already bloody. "You stupid woman," he snarled. "You've killed us all. Better than dying on my knees." They fought in the center of the pass while battle raged around them. Caldwell was strong, fast, skilled from years of warfare. Elira was desperate, angry, fighting with 12 years of accumulated rage. She'd never been trained for this, had no technique, no form, just fury and the will to survive. Caldwell drove her back, blade scoring her armor, drawing blood from her shoulder. Pain bloomed hot and sharp. "You can't win," he panted. "Even if you kill me, my supporters will tear your kingdom apart. Then I'll die fighting them too." She lunged, caught him across the ribs. Not deep, but enough to make him stumble. Around them, Kael's forces were pressing hard. The ambush had worked. Caldwell's men, caught between the pass and the plateau, were being systematically destroyed. But they were fighting back viciously. Bodies littered the ground. Blood turned gravel to mud. Sarah went down with an arrow in her chest. Chen fought like a demon, protecting Alaric's flank. One of Caldwell's soldiers nearly took the king's head off before Kael appeared and drove a spear through the man's gut. Understanding what it means to fight for something beyond survival is like discovering a new kind of strength. When you're fighting just to live, you hold back. You protect yourself. You calculate risks and preserve energy for the next threat. But when you're fighting for something that matters more than your life, all those calculations disappear. You spend everything, burn every reserve, because winning is the only acceptable outcome even if it costs you everything. Elira was fighting with that knowledge, fighting like a woman who'd finally found something worth dying for. Not the kingdom, not the throne, but the right to stand tall and be seen, to matter, to prove that competence with courage was worth more than beauty or birthright. Caldwell was tiring. She could see it in the way his strikes came slower, could feel it in the desperation entering his movements. He'd bet everything on this trap, and it was collapsing around him. "Yield," Elira said. "Call your men off and I'll spare your life." He laughed, bitter and broken. "Spare me? So I can rot in your dungeons like a trophy? I'd rather die fighting. Your choice." She pressed the attack, drove him back toward the cliff face. Her shoulder screamed where his blade had cut. Her legs shook with exhaustion. But she didn't stop, couldn't stop. Caldwell stumbled on loose rock, went to one knee. Elira's sword was at his throat before he could recover. For a moment, they just breathed. Two people who'd destroyed each other meeting at the end of everything. "Do it," Caldwell said. "Prove you're as ruthless as me." "I don't need to prove anything to you," she kept the blade steady. "But I will end this, one way or another." Around them, the battle was dying. Caldwell's forces were broken, surrendering or fleeing. Kael was securing prisoners. Chen was tending to wounded. The pass was a graveyard of bodies and choices. Alaric approached slowly, sword in hand, face a mask of complex emotions. He looked at Caldwell kneeling in the mud, looked at Elira standing over him with a blade at his throat, looked at the carnage they'd created. "End it," the king said quietly. "He deserves death. Probably." Elira didn't take her eyes off Caldwell. But killing him won't end this. His supporters will just find a new leader, make him a martyr, use his death to justify more violence. "Then what do you suggest?" Alaric's voice was strained. "Let him go? Show mercy to a man who kidnapped your husband and tried to destroy your kingdom? No." She pressed the blade just hard enough to draw a thin line of blood. "I suggest we make him watch everything he built crumble, strip his titles, confiscate his lands, imprison him where he can see the kingdom he tried to steal thriving without him. Let him live with the knowledge that he failed, that all his plotting and betrayal and murder achieved nothing except his own destruction. Caldwell's eyes widened. That's worse than death. I know. She smiled coldly. Consider it a lesson in what happens when you underestimate plain queens who do the work. She pulled the blade back, nodded to Kyle. Take him. Maximum security. I want him alive and aware of every day he spends in chains. As soldiers dragged Caldwell away, still cursing, still raging, Elira finally lowered her sword. Her hands were shaking. Her shoulder was bleeding. Her entire body felt like it had been beaten with hammers. But she was alive. They were alive. And the kingdom had survived another day. Alaric moved beside her, put a hand on her uninjured shoulder. You came for me. Did you doubt I would? Honestly? Yes. After everything I've done, everything I've said, I wouldn't have blamed you for leaving me to die. I thought about it. She met his eyes, thought about it very seriously. But it turns out I'm not capable of abandoning people, even when they've abandoned me, even when it would be smarter, easier. That makes you better than me. It makes me tired. She leaned slightly into his support. So tired. They stood together in the ruined pass while Kael's forces organized cleanup and Chen counted the dead. 7 soldiers lost. 12 wounded. 23 of Caldwell's men dead. 40 more captured. The price of survival, written in blood. They made it back to the capital 3 days later. Slower than the journey out because of wounded soldiers and prisoners. Word had spread ahead of them. The streets were packed with people cheering, throwing flowers, calling Elira's name. Not the king's name. Hers. She rode at the head of the column beside Alaric, trying to hold herself upright despite exhaustion and pain. Her shoulder had been stitched and bandaged, but it throbbed with every heartbeat. Her body was a map of bruises and cuts. But she kept her spine straight, kept her chin up, let them see that their queen was battered but unbroken. The council waited in the throne room. They rose when she entered, all of them. A standing ovation that felt equal parts respect and fear. Your Majesty, Lord Vance began, the kingdom owes you a debt we can never repay. You've saved us twice now from destruction, proven yourself in battle and strategy. He paused, choosing words carefully, we would be honored if you would accept formal recognition. Joint rule. Equal authority with the king in all matters. It was everything she'd demanded before, everything she'd fought for. The acknowledgement, the authority, the respect. And it felt hollow, because she'd learned something in that pass, in the moment when Caldwell offered her the seduction of surrender. Power wasn't the point. Recognition wasn't the goal. She'd been chasing validation from people whose opinions didn't matter, fighting to be seen by a court that had never been worth impressing. What she'd really been fighting for was the right to be herself without apology, to stand tall without permission, to matter on her own terms instead of someone else's. I accept your recognition, she said carefully, but not because I need it, because it's long overdue, and it's time this kingdom understood that competence matters more than bloodlines or beauty or any other arbitrary standard. The council shifted uncomfortably. From now on, Elira continued, things change. We reform the treasury with oversight from multiple departments. We restructure the guard with rotating commands to prevent concentration of power. We establish term limits for advisory positions, and we create pathways for capable people to rise regardless of birth. Your Majesty, Peter protested, that would fundamentally alter how this kingdom operates. Good. It should. The old way nearly destroyed us 3 times in as many months. Clearly, something needs to change. She looked at Alaric. The king nodded slowly. What the queen proposes has merit. I support it. Because he'd finally learned, finally understood that the woman beside him had been holding up his throne all along. That partnership wasn't a threat to his power, but the only thing that made his power possible. The council argued, debated, proposed modifications, but in the end, they agreed. Because Elira had proven that she'd walk into hell for this kingdom, and that kind of commitment was worth more than tradition. When it was over, when the documents were signed and witnessed and the court finally dispersed, Elira walked to her chambers and closed the door. Alone. She stripped off her armor, washed blood from her skin, changed into simple clothes, stood at her window looking out over the city she'd saved, and felt nothing. No triumph, no relief, just exhaustion so deep it felt like drowning. The knock came 10 minutes later. Alaric entered without waiting for permission, stopped when he saw her face. "Tell me what you need," he said. "I need to know if this was worth it. If saving you, saving this kingdom, was worth becoming someone I barely recognize. Someone who makes threats and executes plans that get people killed. Someone hard enough to survive, but maybe too hard to be happy." He moved closer, sat beside her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "I don't know if it was worth it, but I know you're the only reason any of us are still alive, the only reason this kingdom hasn't eaten itself. And I know that strength doesn't make you less human. It just makes you human in ways most people never have to be." "I'm tired, Alaric. So tired." "I know." He took her hand. "So rest. Let me carry things for a while. Let the kingdom manage itself. You've earned peace." But the question remained, could she rest? Could someone who'd fought so hard to be seen ever stop fighting? Or was she trapped now, locked into being the strong one, the competent one, the woman who held everything together? Understanding the weight of being indispensable is understanding a trap with no exit. Once people know you'll carry them, they stop carrying themselves. Once you prove you can survive anything, they throw everything at you. And somewhere in that process, you stop being a person and become a function. The one who solves problems, the one who never breaks, the one who sacrifices so others don't have to. Elira had wanted to be seen, to matter, to be valued, and she'd achieved it by becoming the person everyone needed instead of the person she was. The question now was whether those two things could coexist, or whether she'd have to choose between being powerful and being herself. The door burst open. Chen rushed in, face pale. "My queen," he panted, "we have a problem. Of course we do." Elira didn't move. "What now?" "Caldwell's supporters. They've risen in 3 provinces simultaneously. They're declaring him the legitimate ruler and calling for your arrest and execution as a usurper." "How many?" "Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. This isn't a rebellion." Chen's voice shook. "This is civil war." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. All of it. Everything they'd done, everyone who'd died, the battle in the valley, the fight in the pass, Caldwell's imprisonment. None of it had ended anything. It had just delayed the inevitable. The kingdom was tearing itself apart, and this time Elira wasn't sure she had the strength to stop it. She looked at Alaric, saw her own exhaustion reflected in his eyes, looked at Chen, saw desperate hope that she'd have another impossible solution, looked inside herself and found only emptiness. "How long do we have?" she asked quietly. "Days, maybe a week before they coordinate their forces and march on the capital. Then we have days to decide." She stood, feeling every injury, every bruise, every piece of herself she'd spent, to decide if this kingdom is worth bleeding for again, or if it's time to let it fall and save ourselves. "My queen, you can't mean that." "Can't I?" She met Chen's eyes. "I've given everything to this place. My dignity, my peace, my humanity piece by piece. And it's never enough. The fighting never stops. The betrayals never end. At what point do I accept that some things can't be saved?" "You're exhausted." Alaric stood. "You need rest, food, time to heal. Then we'll face this." "There is no then. There's only now. And more fighting, and more death. And I'm so goddamn tired of being the one who has to fix everything." "Then don't." A new voice from the doorway. They turned. Kyle stood there, armor still stained with blood from the pass. Behind him, Dara, Vance, Finch, other council members, soldiers, servants, faces she recognized and faces she didn't. "You've done enough," Kyle said. "You've proven yourself a dozen times over. So let us fight this battle. Let us prove we're worth what you've spent saving us." Elira looked at them, this ragtag collection of people who'd finally stepped up, who'd finally understood that kingdoms weren't saved by one person carrying everything, but by everyone carrying something. "You'd fight for me?" she asked. "Even though it might cost everything?" "We'd fight for the kingdom you're trying to build." Kael moved forward, one where competence matters, where loyalty is earned, where people like us can rise on merit instead of birth. That's worth fighting for. That's worth dying for. And if we lose, then we lose having tried, same as you've been doing alone for 12 years. Elira felt something crack in her chest, not breaking, opening, letting in the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry this alone anymore. All right, she said, then we fight. But we fight smart. We fight together. And when this is over, win or lose, things change. This kingdom becomes what we're bleeding for, or it doesn't deserve to survive. They gathered around her, made plans, drew strategies, prepared for war. And somewhere in the process, Elira realized she wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for transformation, for the chance to forge something new from the wreckage of everything old. The kingdom was burning. Civil war was coming. Everything she'd built was crumbling. But for the first time in her life, Queen Elira Vale wasn't facing it alone. And that made all the difference. The War Council stretched into night as reports kept arriving. Caldwell's supporters had seized key fortresses, were blocking trade routes, had declared their own shadow government with Caldwell as the legitimate king in exile. It was coordinated, planned. They'd been preparing for this moment for months, maybe years. And now it was here. Elira stood over maps marked with red for enemy forces and blue for loyalists. The Reds outnumbered the Blues 3-1. We can't win this conventionally, she said. We're outnumbered. Our treasury's depleted. Half our forces are recovering from the Valley battle. Then we don't fight conventionally. Vance pointed to supply lines. We cut their logistics, make it impossible for them to sustain large forces in the field, force them to split up into smaller units we can handle, and we make alliances. Dara traced routes to neighboring kingdoms, offer trade concessions, military support against their enemies, whatever it takes to bring in reinforcements. Chen shook his head. That'll take weeks to negotiate. We have days, so we buy time. Kale's finger landed on a river crossing. We fortify here. Make them bleed for every mile. Slow them down while we build support. They argued strategy until words blurred together. Every plan had holes. Every approach risked disaster. There were no good options, just different flavors of desperate. Finally, Alaric spoke. His voice cut through the debate. We're thinking about this wrong. Everyone turned. We're treating this like a military problem. He looked at Elira. But it's not. It's a legitimacy problem. Caldwell's supporters believe he's the rightful ruler, that we're usurpers, that Elira's power is illegal. So we don't beat them with armies. We beat them with truth. What truth? Elira asked. That you're the only thing holding this kingdom together. That without you, it falls apart. He straightened. We make them see what we've all finally seen. That birthright means nothing compared to competence. That the person who does the work deserves the power. And how do we make them see that? Alaric smiled, sad and certain. By stepping aside. By making me abdicate in your favor. By forcing them to choose between a queen who saves kingdoms and a lord who destroys them. The room went dead silent. Alaric, you can't, Elira started. I can. And I should have years ago. He looked at the council. Everyone here knows it. You've all known for years that Elira's the real power. I'm just the face, the symbol. So let's make that official. Let me pass the crown to someone who's earned it. That's, Vance struggled for words, unprecedented, dangerous. It could split the kingdom even further. It could unite it. Dara's voice was thoughtful. Force everyone to choose sides not between noble houses but between competence and chaos. Or it could start a war that makes this look minor, Finch countered. The war's already started. Alaric's voice was firm. This just gives it meaning, makes it about something real instead of power games and pride. Elira looked at him, saw genuine conviction, saw a man finally understanding what he should have understood 12 years ago. You'd really do this? She asked. Give up your crown? It was never really mine, he smiled. You've been wearing it all along. I was just keeping it warm. Understanding the moment when someone finally sees you is like coming up for air after drowning. All the years of being invisible, of being dismissed, of being treated like you don't matter, suddenly reversed in one clear moment of recognition. Alaric was offering her what she'd fought for her entire life. Not just acknowledgement, not just partnership, but the crown itself. The symbol that would force everyone to see what they'd been refusing to see. That competence mattered more than bloodlines. That the person who did the work deserved the power. And that Queen Elira Vale had earned her throne 100 times over. But accepting meant stepping into a spotlight that would make her every enemy's primary target. Meant becoming the symbol of everything Caldwell's supporters hated. Meant trading the shadows where she'd thrived for exposure that could destroy her. "I need time," she said, "to think about this." "We don't have time," Chen said gently. "The coronation would need to happen immediately. Before Caldwell's forces can coordinate, we'd need to make it public, broadcast it to every province, force everyone to acknowledge the change. So I have to decide now." Elira felt the weight of it crushing her. Tonight, whether to take the crown or let this moment pass. Yes. She looked around the room, at faces watching her with hope and fear and desperate faith, at Alaric offering her everything, at the maps showing a kingdom tearing itself apart, at the choice that would define everything. "Then I need air," she said. "Give me an hour. I'll have your answer." She walked out before anyone could stop her. Climbed stairs to the highest tower. Stood on the battlements looking out over the city as night settled in. The wind was cold, the stars were bright, and Queen Elira Vale stood alone with the weight of a kingdom on her shoulders and a choice that would change everything. Take the crown and become the target, reject it and stay in the shadows. Power or safety, recognition or survival. And she had 1 hour to decide which mattered more. The city sprawled below her, lights flickering in windows, smoke rising from chimneys. Thousands of people who had no idea their queen was standing in the darkness trying to choose between being everything or being nothing. Her shoulder throbbed. Her body ached. Her soul felt scraped raw. But somewhere in the pain, in the exhaustion, in the impossible weight of decision, Elira felt something else. Clarity. She knew what she was going to choose, had known from the moment Alaric offered. The question was whether she had the courage to do it. And as the hour ticked away, and the stars wheeled overhead and the city breathed beneath her, Queen Elira Vale stood at the edge of everything and prepared to jump. The hour passed like a lifetime. Elira stood on the battlements watching stars and thinking about choices. About the 12 years she'd spent being invisible. About the woman who'd married a king, hoping love could be earned through loyalty. About battles fought and betrayals survived and the mountain of corpses she'd built trying to prove her worth to people who'd never cared. The wind pulled at her hair. Her shoulder throbbed where Caldwell's blade had cut. Her hands gripped cold stone and she breathed the night air and felt something inside her finally settle. She knew what she was going to do, had known from the moment Alaric offered. Maybe had known longer than that. Maybe had been building toward this decision her entire life without realizing it. The question had never been whether to take the crown. The question had been whether she was brave enough to walk away from everything she'd fought for. And the answer was yes. She descended the tower stairs slowly, each step measured, each breath deliberate. By the time she reached the war room, her decision sat in her chest like iron, unshakable, terrifying. Right. The council looked up when she entered. Every face turned toward her with desperate hope. Alaric stood, hand extended like he could pull her toward the future he'd offered. "I've made my decision," Elira said. The room held its breath. "I'm not taking the crown." Silence. Then chaos. Voices erupting. Protests and questions and desperate arguments. Chen looking stricken, Kyle's face going hard. Dara shaking her head like she couldn't believe what she'd heard. Alaric moved through the noise to stand in front of her. "You can't mean that." "I do." Her voice cut through the room. "I mean it completely. After everything, after fighting so hard to be recognized, you're just going to walk away?" "I'm not walking away." She looked at the council, at the maps, at the kingdom tearing itself apart. "I'm choosing differently, choosing something I should have chosen years ago." "Which is what?" Vance's voice was strained. "Myself." Elira felt the truth of it settling. For 12 years, I've been fighting to be seen by people whose opinions don't matter. Fighting to prove my worth to a kingdom that only valued me when it needed something. I've bled myself dry trying to earn respect that should have been freely given. And I'm done. I'm done performing, done sacrificing, done being the competent queen who holds everything together while everyone else plays power games. "Then what are you saying?" Alaric's face was pale. "That you're leaving? Abandoning us?" "I'm saying I'm choosing a different kind of power. The kind that doesn't come from crowns or titles or recognition. The kind that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to compromise that for anything. Understanding the moment when you realize that external validation is a trap takes a lifetime. You spend years thinking that if you just work hard enough, prove yourself thoroughly enough, sacrifice deeply enough, people will finally see you, will finally acknowledge your worth, will finally give you the respect you deserve. But it never happens. Because the people whose respect you're chasing don't value what you offer. They value what they understand. Beauty, birthright, the things that come easily to them. And you can kill yourself trying to earn what they'll never freely give. Or you can stop performing, stop begging, stop sacrificing pieces of yourself for scraps of acknowledgement. You can choose to value yourself even when nobody else does. And that choice, that singular act of self-recognition, is more powerful than any crown. You're making a mistake, Chen said quietly. The kingdom needs you. The kingdom needs to learn to function without one person holding everything together. She looked at each of them. I've done the work. Restructured the treasury, reformed the guard, created systems that don't depend on one competent person sacrificing everything. Now you get to prove those systems work. You get to stand up and be the leaders I've been covering for. And the Civil War? Kale's voice was hard. The forces marching on us right now, fight them. Win or lose on your own merit instead of hiding behind mine. She felt the weight lifting as she spoke. I'll help you plan. I'll advise. But I'm done being the shield you hide behind when things get hard. Alaric grabbed her arm. Not rough, desperate. Elira, please, I'm offering you everything. The crown. The power. The recognition you've earned 100 times over. Don't throw it away. I'm not throwing it away. She pulled free gently. I'm choosing something worth more. My peace. My humanity. The parts of myself I've been sacrificing to hold up a kingdom that never asked if I wanted to carry it. His eyes were wet. I need you. No. You need to learn to stand on your own. She cupped his face with one hand. For 12 years I've been your competence, your strategy, your backbone. And it's made you weak, made you dependent. This is your chance to become the king you should have been all along. Don't waste it. What if I can't? What if I fail? Then you fail, and you learn from it. Or you don't, and the kingdom finds someone better. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. She turned to address the full council. I'll stay through the week, help you coordinate defenses, make sure the transition is stable. But after that, I'm leaving the capital, going somewhere quiet, somewhere I can remember who I was before I became what everyone needed. Where will you go? Dara asked. I don't know yet. Somewhere the name Elira Vale doesn't mean anything. Somewhere I can be plain and unremarkable and perfectly happy with both. This is madness, Vance protested. You're the best strategic mind in the kingdom. Walking away now is suicide. For you, maybe. For me, it's survival. She smiled, sad and certain. I've been dying by inches for 12 years, sacrificing pieces of myself to keep this place running. Now I'm choosing to live. Even if that means watching from a distance while you figure out how to function without me. The council argued, pleaded, offered compromises, more power, better titles, anything to make her stay. But Elira had made her choice, and for the first time in her life, no amount of external pressure could change it, because she'd finally learned the most important lesson, that choosing yourself wasn't selfish, it was necessary, that you couldn't save anyone if you destroyed yourself in the process. That strength meant knowing when to walk away instead of bleeding yourself dry for people who'd never appreciate the sacrifice. The meeting ended in chaos, but Elira walked out calm, settled, free in ways she'd never been before. The next 7 days were brutal. Elira kept her word, helped coordinate defenses against Caldwell's supporters, drew up strategies for the council to implement, worked with Kael to position forces at key choke points, with Chen to identify and neutralize remaining traitors, with Finch to reallocate resources for a prolonged conflict. But she did it differently, didn't carry the weight alone, forced the council to make decisions, to own their choices, to step up and be the leaders they'd been pretending to be while she did the actual work. It was terrifying for them, liberating for her. Alaric watched it happen with something like grief in his eyes, watched the woman who'd held up his throne prepare to walk away, tried a dozen times to change her mind with arguments that grew more desperate each day. On the 5th night, he found her in her chambers packing the few possessions she'd accumulated over 12 years. Books, mostly. A few pieces of simple clothing, nothing that screamed queen or power or status. You're really doing this, he said from the doorway. I really am. He moved into the room, sat heavily in a chair. I don't know how to do this without you. You'll learn, or you won't. Either way, you'll survive. Will I? His voice cracked. Will the kingdom? Probably. People are more resilient than you think. She folded a dress, placed it in her pack. And if it doesn't, then maybe it doesn't deserve to. Maybe a kingdom that can only function when one person sacrifices everything is a kingdom that should fall. That's harsh. It's honest. She stopped packing, looked at him. Alaric, you're not a bad man. You're just a man who was given power without wisdom, who mistook beauty for value and flattery for truth. But you can learn, can grow, can become someone worth the crown you wear. You just have to choose to do the work instead of waiting for someone else to do it for you. Teach me. He leaned forward. Stay and teach me how to be what you are. No, because if I stay, you'll never learn. You'll just lean on me again, use my competence as a crutch, and I'll resent you for it until we both drown in bitterness. She sat across from him. The only way you grow is if I leave. The only way either of us survives is if we choose ourselves instead of this broken thing we've been pretending is a marriage. Do you hate me? The question came out small. For what I did? For Seraphine and the dismissal and all of it? No. Hate would be easier. She smiled sadly. I pity you. You had something real and you threw it away for an illusion. You had loyalty and you traded it for desire. And now you have to live with that, have to sit on your throne and remember that the woman who saved you is walking away because you couldn't see her value until she was already gone. Understanding forgiveness is understanding that some debts can't be repaid. Some betrayals can't be undone. Some damage is permanent. But forgiveness isn't about reconciliation or restoration or pretending the hurt didn't happen. It's about releasing yourself from the weight of carrying someone else's failure. It's choosing to move forward unburdened instead of staying stuck in justified anger. Elira could have hated Alaric, could have made him pay for every slight, every dismissal, every moment he'd made her feel invisible. Could have spent the rest of her life making sure he understood exactly what he'd lost. But that would have chained her to him forever, would have made her healing dependent on his suffering. So she chose differently. Chose to forgive not because he deserved it, but because she deserved to be free. I'm sorry, Alaric said, for all of it. If I could go back. You can't. And apologies don't fix 12 years of damage. She stood. But you can do better going forward. Can be someone future people don't need to forgive. That's all any of us can do. He left eventually, shoulders bent, face older than his years, looking like a man who'd finally understood the weight of consequences. And Elira went back to packing. But the coronation happened on the 6th day. Not Elira's coronation, Alaric's. A recommitment ceremony where the king reaffirmed his vows to the kingdom, promised to rule with wisdom instead of whim, to value competence over birthright, to build the kind of realm Elira had been trying to create all along. She attended because the council begged her to. Stood at the back of the throne room in simple clothes, watching Alaric speak words she'd helped him write, watching the court react with hope and skepticism in equal measure. When it was over, he looked for her in the crowd. Their eyes met across the room. He raised a hand, not a wave, just acknowledgement, gratitude, goodbye. She nodded once and walked out. That night, Chen found her in the stables checking her horse. A simple mare, sturdy and reliable. Nothing flashy, perfect for disappearing. The spy master approached quietly. I had them prepare supplies, food for 2 weeks, maps, enough coin to start over somewhere new. Thank you. Where will you go? South, maybe. Somewhere with ocean. I've never seen the ocean. She tightened the saddle, checked straps. Somewhere I can wake up and not have to be strong or competent or strategic. Somewhere I can just be. Chen was quiet for a moment. I've served this kingdom for 23 years. Watched kings and queens rise and fall. Watched good people destroy themselves for power and bad people thrive on cruelty. And in all that time, I've never seen anyone like you. Someone who walked away from power because they valued themselves more. Is that a compliment or criticism? Both. He smiled. The kingdom would be better if you stayed, but you'll be better if you leave. And I think, after everything, you've earned the right to choose yourself. What will you do? After I'm gone? My job, Chen's voice was firm. Protect what we've built. Make sure your reforms survive. Try to keep these fools from destroying themselves now that you're not here to save them. Good luck with that. I'll need it. He held out a sealed letter. For when you're settled, when you've found peace. Open it then. Not before. She took the letter, felt its weight. What is it? A reminder that what you did mattered, that even if the kingdom forgets, some of us never will. Tears stung her eyes. She blinked them back. Thank you, Chen, for everything. Thank you, Your Majesty, for showing us what real strength looks like. He bowed, deep and genuine, then walked away. Elira stood in the stables with her packed horse and a letter she wouldn't open for months, and felt the last chains falling away. She was really doing this, really walking away from everything she'd fought for, really choosing the quiet unknown over the loud familiar. And it felt like flying. She left at dawn on the 7th day. No fanfare, no witnesses. Just a woman on a horse riding through the palace gates while the city still slept. The guards on duty nodded as she passed. Didn't stop her, didn't question, just let Queen Elira Vale ride into the sunrise and whatever lay beyond. The road south was empty, beautiful in the early light. Fields stretched gold and green on both sides. Birds sang. Wind carried the smell of earth and growing things. Elira rode slowly. No hurry, no destination, just movement toward something new. She stopped at a village 3 days later. Small place, maybe 200 people. An inn with decent beds and better food. She paid for a room, gave a false name, and slept for 16 hours straight. When she woke, she walked through the village and felt something strange. Nobody recognized her. Nobody stared. Nobody whispered about the plain queen or the burden or any of it. She was just another traveler, unremarkable, invisible in the best possible way. She ate lunch at a small cafe. The owner, a woman about her age with flour in her hair and laugh lines around her eyes, brought tea and bread. Passing through or staying? The woman asked. I don't know yet. Elira realized she meant it. Maybe both. We could use help if you're looking for work. Kitchen, mostly. Some serving, nothing glamorous, but it pays fair and includes a room. I'll think about it. The woman smiled and moved on to other customers. Didn't push, didn't pry. Just offered and let Elira decide. That night, Elira sat in her rented room and thought about the offer. About spending days cooking and serving instead of strategizing and ruling. About earning wages instead of wielding power. About being nobody special in a place that didn't care about queens or kingdoms or any of it. It sounded perfect. She took the job the next morning, started washing dishes and chopping vegetables and learning the rhythm of a kitchen that fed hungry people instead of political ambitions. The work was hard, physical, honest. By the end of each day, her hands ached and her feet hurt, and she fell into bed exhausted. And for the first time in 12 years, she slept through the night. No nightmares, no anxiety, no weight crushing her chest, just deep, dreamless sleep that left her rested. Weeks passed, then months. Elira settled into the village like water finding its level, learned the names of regulars at the cafe, helped the owner experiment with new recipes, started a small garden behind the inn growing herbs and vegetables. People knew her as Lyra, the quiet woman who worked hard and smiled rarely but genuinely, who helped neighbors fix roofs and watched children when parents needed breaks, who told stories sometimes about faraway places but never about herself. Nobody asked about her past. Nobody cared about her scars or the way she sometimes woke at night reaching for weapons that weren't there. They just accepted her as she was. Plain, unremarkable. Exactly enough. Understanding what it means to be enough is understanding that you were never insufficient. The world lied to you. Told you that you needed to be more beautiful, more charming, more whatever arbitrary standard it had invented to keep you chasing validation. But those standards were always false, always designed to make you feel lacking. So you'd keep performing, keep sacrificing, keep destroying yourself trying to earn worth that should have been inherent. Being enough means recognizing that lie, rejecting it, choosing to value yourself based on your own standards instead of someone else's. It means waking up in a small village, working a simple job, and feeling more powerful than you ever did wearing a crown. Because this power is yours, unchosen by others, ungiven by circumstance, just the quiet strength of knowing who you are and being content with that. 6 months after leaving the capital, Elira finally opened Chen's letter. She sat on a hill overlooking the ocean she'd ridden so far to see. Waves crashed below. Salt wind tangled her hair. And she broke the seal. The letter was short, written in Chen's precise hand. Your Majesty, by the time you read this, I hope you've found the peace you deserve. I hope the world is treating you with the gentleness you were denied for so long. I hope you've remembered how to smile without calculation and sleep without nightmares. I write to tell you that your reforms are holding. The kingdom struggles, yes. We've had setbacks and challenges and moments where everything nearly collapsed. But we survive. Because you built systems that work. Because you trained people to think instead of just obey. Because you planted seeds that are growing even in your absence. Alaric is learning, slowly, with many stumbles. But he's trying, actually listening to advisors, making decisions based on wisdom instead of ego. He'll never be what you were, but he's becoming something better than what he was. And that's enough. The Civil War ended 3 weeks after you left. Caldwell's supporters fractured without unified leadership. Most surrendered when offered amnesty. A few diehards remain in the mountains, but they're raiders, not a real threat. The kingdom is healing, not healed, but healing. We miss you. I miss you. But I'm glad you left. Glad you chose yourself. Because watching you destroy yourself to save us was like watching the sun burn itself out to give us light. Beautiful and terrible and ultimately unsustainable. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, know that you mattered. That the kingdom you saved remembers. That the systems you built endure. That the people you protected are thriving. And know that you are always enough. Always worthy. Always deserving of the recognition that came too late. May you find peace, Your Majesty. You earned it 1,000 times over. Your servant and friend, Chen. Elira read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket. Sat watching waves and breathing salt air and feeling something warm settle in her chest. The kingdom was surviving without her. Not just surviving, growing, learning, becoming what she'd tried to build. And she was free. Free to be plain, to be unremarkable, to wake up each day and choose herself instead of sacrifice, to matter in small ways to small groups of people instead of large ways to masses who'd never cared. She thought about Alaric sometimes, wondered if he was really learning or just performing growth the way he'd performed everything else. Hoped for his sake he was genuine. But she didn't need to know, didn't need closure or confirmation or any of it. She'd made her choice, walked away, built something new from nothing, and that was enough. 2 years passed like a quiet dream. Elira became part of the village fabric. Not special, not celebrated, just present. The woman who ran the cafe after the owner retired, who grew the best tomatoes in the valley, who told stories to children on summer evenings about clever queens and foolish kings and the power of knowing your worth. She made friends, real friends who liked her for her dry humor and steady hands and willingness to help. Who didn't care that she was plain or quiet or had scars she never explained, who just enjoyed her company and offered theirs in return. She even found something close to romance, a fisherman named Marcus who brought her fresh catch and made her laugh, and never asked about the nightmares that still occasionally woke her. Who was content with quiet companionship and didn't need her to be anything more than herself. It wasn't passion, wasn't the desperate love she'd felt for Alaric in those early years, but it was real. Honest, built on actually knowing each other instead of performance and illusion. And it was enough, more than enough. One afternoon, a messenger arrived in the village. Royal livery, official business, asking for directions to someone named Lyra who worked at the cafe. Elira saw him from the kitchen window, felt her stomach drop, felt 12 years of instinct screaming at her to run or hide or prepare for attack. But she didn't. Just wiped her hands on her apron and walked out to meet him. The messenger bowed. Too deep for a simple cafe worker. Message from the capital, my lady. For Queen Elira Vale. She took the sealed letter. Heavy paper, royal seal. Her heart hammered. Just Elira. I haven't been a queen for 2 years. The messenger bowed again and left. Elira stood in the village square holding a letter that connected her to a life she'd left behind. People walked past, going about their business, not knowing that their quiet neighbor was staring at a piece of paper that could shatter her carefully built peace. She almost threw it away unread, almost tossed it in the fire and went back to chopping vegetables. But curiosity won. She broke the seal and read. The letter was from Alaric. His handwriting had improved, steadier, more confident. Elira, I hope this letter finds you well. I hope you found the peace you were seeking. I hope the world is treating you with the kindness you deserve. I write because I need you to know something. The kingdom is stable, thriving even. Your reforms created a foundation strong enough to weather the storms we've faced. The council functions independently now. The treasury is balanced. The provinces are mostly peaceful. We've even begun trade negotiations with neighboring kingdoms on terms that would make you proud. I tell you this not to brag, but to thank you. Every success we achieve is built on work you did, systems you created, standards you set. You saved this kingdom twice over, once by fighting for it, once by forcing us to learn to save ourselves. I also write to apologize. Not because I think apologies fix anything, but because you deserve to hear it said clearly. I failed you. Failed to see your worth until you were already gone. Failed to value loyalty until betrayal taught me its cost. Failed to be the partner you deserved and the king the kingdom needed. I've spent 2 years trying to become better, trying to build something worthy of the foundation you laid. Some days I succeed, some days I fail spectacularly. But I keep trying, because the alternative is dishonoring everything you sacrificed. I don't expect forgiveness. Don't expect you to come back. Don't expect anything except that you'll read this and know that your work mattered, that you mattered, that the plain queen who did the work became a legend people tell stories about, the woman who walked away from power because she valued herself more. They're building a statue of you in the Capitol Square, commissioned by popular demand. The people wanted to honor the queen who saved them. I tried to stop it, knowing you'd hate the attention, but they insisted. So there you'll stand in bronze forever. A reminder that competence matters more than beauty, that loyalty is worth more than desire, that the person who does the work deserves the crown. I hope you never see it. I hope you stay wherever you are, living quietly, being happy. You earned that peace more than anyone I've ever known. But I needed you to know, needed you to understand that you won, not the battles or the wars or the political games, but something deeper. You changed what power means in this kingdom, changed what we value, changed us all for the better just by refusing to accept being undervalued. Thank you, Elira, for everything, for the years you gave, for the kingdom you built, for showing me what strength really looks like. I hope you find love. I hope you find joy. I hope you find everything I failed to give you. And I hope someday you can think of your time here without pain, just as a chapter in a long story that led you to wherever you are now. Be well. Be happy. Be everything you deserve to be. With respect and regret, Alaric. Elira read the letter twice, then walked to the ocean and sat on her favorite rock and watched waves while tears she hadn't expected ran down her face. They weren't tears of regret, or longing, or even particularly about Alaric. They were tears of release, of recognizing that the pain she'd carried for so long had finally transformed into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, not reconciliation, but peace. The quiet understanding that the past was past, that she'd survived it, that she'd built something beautiful from the ruins. She thought about the statue, about people in the capital telling stories about the competent queen, about her legacy living on in systems and reforms and changed perspectives. It should have made her happy, should have felt like vindication, but mostly she just felt tired. Tired of being a symbol, tired of being anyone's legend, tired of mattering in grand ways when all she wanted was to matter in small ones. She crumpled the letter and let the ocean take it, watched it dissolve in waves and disappear. Then she stood, brushed sand from her skirt, and walked back to the village, back to the cafe where she was just Lyra, back to the life she'd built from nothing. Marcus was waiting at her house with fresh fish and an easy smile. "You all right? You look like you've been crying." "I'm fine." She kissed his cheek, just saying goodbye to something that's been dead a long time. They cooked dinner together, ate on the small porch overlooking the valley, talked about nothing important, laughed at jokes that weren't funny but felt good anyway, held hands as stars came out, and Elira felt something she hadn't felt in 12 years, maybe hadn't felt ever. complete, whole, enough exactly as she was. Maki. 5 years after leaving the capital, Elira stood in her garden and felt the weight of peace settle into her bones like sunlight. The cafe was thriving. The village was growing. She'd helped establish a school where children learned to read and think and value themselves regardless of how they looked or where they came from. She taught sometimes. Simple lessons about strategy and problem solving and the importance of knowing your worth. Never mentioned being a queen. Never traded on old glory. Just shared what she'd learned in ways that helped young people avoid her mistakes. Marcus proposed on a quiet evening. No grand gesture, no performance. Just a simple question asked while they washed dishes together. Do you want to build a life with me? Really build one? She'd said yes, not because she needed him, not because she was incomplete without him, but because partnership built on honest affection was worth more than passion built on illusions. They married in the village, small ceremony, friends and neighbors, laughter and good food and dancing until the stars came out. Nobody cared that the bride was plain or that her past was mysterious. They just celebrated two people choosing each other with clear eyes and open hearts. Understanding what it means to choose happiness is understanding that it's always been a choice. The world tells you happiness is something you earn, something you achieve by being good enough or successful enough or recognized enough. But happiness is simpler and harder than that. It's choosing to value what you have instead of mourning what you lack. It's building small joys instead of chasing grand victories. It's waking up in a life you created and feeling grateful instead of restless. Elira had spent 12 years chasing validation, thinking if she just proved herself thoroughly enough, she'd finally feel worthy. But worthiness was never the destination. It was always the starting point. The thing she should have granted herself from the beginning instead of waiting for others to give it to her. She was enough, had always been enough. And finally, after everything, she believed it. Sometimes news from the capital reached the village. The kingdom was prospering. Alaric had remarried, a scholar this time, someone chosen for wisdom instead of beauty. The reforms were holding. The statue in the square had become a pilgrimage site where people left flowers and notes thanking the legend of the competent queen. Elira heard these stories and felt nothing. No pride. No regret. Just distant acknowledgement that somewhere she used to live, people were telling stories about someone she used to be. But that woman was gone, transformed, reborn into someone simpler and happier and infinitely more at peace. 10 years after leaving, an old woman appeared at the cafe, bent with age but sharp-eyed, familiar in ways Elira couldn't immediately place. Then the woman smiled and Elira's heart stopped. Dara, the commander, aged a decade but unmistakably herself. My queen, Dara said softly. Or should I say Lyra? Elira looked around. The cafe was empty, late afternoon lull. She gestured to a chair. Just Lyra, please. They sat. Two women who'd fought together once, who'd bled for the same kingdom, who'd made impossible choices and lived with consequences. You found me, Elira said. Took a while. Dara's smile was small. You covered your tracks well. But I'm stubborn. Why? Because I wanted to see for myself. Dara looked around the cafe, at the simple furniture, the lived-in comfort, the evidence of a life built on quiet contentment, wanted to know if you really found what you were looking for. Did I? You tell me. Are you happy? Elira thought about it, really considered the question, thought about mornings waking beside Marcus, afternoons in the garden, evenings teaching children, the simple rhythm of days that mattered in small ways to small circles. Yes, she said finally, I'm happy. Not the grand happiness of victories or recognition, just the quiet kind. The everyday kind. The kind that doesn't make stories but makes life worth living. Good. Dara's eyes were wet. That's good. Because back in the capital, people argue about whether you abandoned us or saved us by leaving. Whether walking away was cowardice or the bravest thing you ever did. What do you think? I think you did what you needed to survive, and I think the kingdom needed to learn to survive without you. So maybe both things are true. She reached across the table, took Elira's hand. But I wanted you to know, what you built is holding, the systems, the values, the idea that competence matters more than birthright. It's all still there, still working, still changing lives. I'm glad. And she meant it, genuinely, without reservation. I'm glad they're thriving. We miss you, though. Some of us. Not the court or the nobles, but the people who really knew you. Chen died 2 years ago, peaceful in his sleep. His last words were about you, about how you taught him that loyalty was earned, not demanded. Tears stung Elira's eyes. He was a good man. He was. And he'd be glad to see this. To see you at peace. They talked until sunset. About the kingdom, about the cafe, about choices and consequences and the strange paths life takes. When Dara finally stood to leave, she hugged Elira tight. Thank you, the old commander whispered, for everything, for saving us, for teaching us, for showing us what real strength looks like. Thank you for letting me go, for not making me feel guilty for choosing myself. Dara left, disappeared back into the world, and Elira stood in her cafe feeling the weight of her old life finally, completely, release its hold. She was free, had been free for years, but somehow that goodbye made it final, made it real in ways it hadn't been before. That night, she lay beside Marcus and told him everything, about being a queen, about battles and betrayals and walking away from power, about 12 years of fighting to be seen and 2 years of learning to see herself. He listened without judgment, without surprise even. When she finished, he just kissed her forehead and said, I figured it was something like that. Nobody has eyes that tired unless they've carried the world. Does it bother you? That I didn't tell you before? No? Everyone gets to decide when their story starts. If yours starts the day you walked into this village, that's valid. Everything before was just the prologue that made you who you are. And who am I? Someone who knows her worth. Someone who chose peace over power. Someone I'm lucky to love. Understanding that you can be more than one thing, more than one version of yourself across a lifetime, is understanding that identity is fluid. The woman who married Alaric and the queen who saved kingdoms and the cafe owner who grows tomatoes are all the same person. But they're also different, shaped by circumstances and choices and the accumulation of experience. Elira had been all these women, had evolved through each version, shedding what didn't serve her, keeping what did. And now she was something new, something she'd never been before. Simply herself. No titles, no roles, no performance, just Elira. Plain, unremarkable. Perfectly, completely enough. She fell asleep that night with Marcus's arms around her and the ocean breathing in the distance and the weight of 12 years finally transformed into the lightness of choosing herself. And she dreamed of nothing. No nightmares, no anxieties, no ghosts of the woman she'd been. Just deep, peaceful darkness that felt like home. 20 years after leaving the capital, Elira sat on her porch watching grandchildren play in the garden she'd spent decades cultivating. Her hair was white now, her hands marked with age and work, her face lined with years of honest living. Marcus had died the previous winter, peaceful, surrounded by family, holding her hand and smiling about a life well lived. She missed him in quiet ways. In the morning tea he used to bring her, in the space beside her at night, in the 1,000 small rituals they'd built together, but she wasn't destroyed by the loss, wasn't broken, just sad. The way you're sad when something beautiful ends naturally instead of being torn away. A letter arrived that afternoon. Royal Courier, official seal. She almost didn't open it, almost sent it back unread. But curiosity won. Inside was an invitation to the kingdom's anniversary celebration, 50 years since Alaric's coronation. They were honoring the architects of the current peace, and they wanted her there, wanted the legend to appear one last time. There was also a personal note. From Alaric. Shaky handwriting now, old age catching up. Elira. This is probably my last request. I'm dying. The healers give me months at best, and before I go, I need to see you one more time. Not as king and queen, just as two people who once loved each other and destroyed that love through ignorance and pride. I need to say goodbye properly, to thank you face to face, to tell you that everything good in this kingdom traces back to you. Please come, not for the celebration, just for an old man who finally understands what he lost. Alaric. She read it 3 times, felt nothing at first, then a slow wave of something softer. Not love, not even affection really, just recognition. Two people who'd shared history, who'd wounded each other and survived, who'd built different lives from the rubble of what they'd destroyed together. She should say no, should stay in her village with her grandchildren and her garden and her peace. Shouldn't walk back into the past she'd spent 20 years leaving behind. But something pulled at her, not obligation, not duty, just the quiet knowledge that some circles need closing, some goodbyes need saying, some endings need witnessing. She wrote back, brief, simple. I'll come, but only to see you, not for the celebration, not for recognition, just for goodbye. Peace. The journey to the capital took a week. Elira rode in a simple carriage, watching countryside she'd forgotten transform back into memory. The roads were better now, the villages more prosperous, the people healthier, evidence of the kingdom thriving on foundations she'd helped build. She entered the capital wearing plain clothes. No announcement, no fanfare. Just an old woman arriving quietly. But people recognized her anyway. The statue in the square was unmistakable. Her younger face captured in bronze, the competent queen who'd walked away. Crowds gathered, whispered, pointed. Some cried. Others bowed. She kept walking, feeling the weight of legend pressing down, feeling claustrophobic in ways she hadn't felt in decades. A guard escorted her to the palace. Through gates she'd walked through a lifetime ago, past corridors that looked the same but felt different. Everything was cleaner, brighter, less oppressive. They'd built it into something worth saving. She could see that, could feel it in the air. The palace wasn't a monument to power anymore. It was a workplace, a place where people did the business of governance without the crushing weight of ego and performance. Her reforms had held, had grown, had transformed the entire structure. She felt pride in that, quiet satisfaction that her work had mattered. Alaric waited in a private chamber, small room, simple furnishings. He sat in a chair by the window, wrapped in blankets despite the summer heat. He'd aged terribly, face sunken, body frail, but his eyes were clear. He smiled when she entered. Elira, you came. I said I would. She sat across from him. How are you feeling? Like a man at the end. He coughed, but peaceful. Ready. I've made my peace with most things. Most? I'll never make peace with how I treated you, with what I destroyed through stupidity and vanity, but I've learned to carry that regret, to let it teach me instead of destroy me. They sat in comfortable silence, two old people who'd once been young and foolish and desperate, who'd wounded each other and survived, who'd become different people through the accumulation of choices and time. The kingdom looks good, Elira said, prosperous, stable, because of you. Everything good here traces back to systems you built, values you established, the idea that competence matters. I just maintained what you created. You did more than maintain, you grew it, made it better. That takes work, takes choosing to learn instead of staying stuck. I had a good teacher, even if I was too stupid to appreciate the lessons at the time. Understanding forgiveness after decades is different from understanding it in the moment. In the moment, forgiveness feels impossible. The wounds are too fresh, the betrayal too raw. But time transforms everything, softens the sharp edges, adds context and perspective, shows you that people are complex and flawed and capable of growth, that the person who hurt you might genuinely become better, that holding on to anger doesn't punish them, it just poisons you. So you let it go. Not because they earned it, but because you deserve the freedom that comes from releasing ancient grievances. I forgive you, Elira said. Not because you deserve it, not because what you did was acceptable, but because I'm tired of carrying the weight of your mistakes, because I want to die with peace instead of bitterness, because you clearly learned and grew and became someone better, and that's enough. Alaric's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. I don't deserve that, but thank you. Tell me about your life. Did you find happiness? I did. He smiled through tears. Married a woman who challenged me, who told me when I was being an idiot, who valued my mind over my crown. We had 3 children, good children who inherited her wisdom instead of my arrogance. I learned to be a real partner, learned to listen, learned everything I should have learned with you. I'm glad. She meant it, genuinely. I'm glad you became better, even if it came too late for us. What about you? Were you happy? Yes. I built a simple life, ran a cafe, raised a family, dyed my hair and taught children and grew old beside a good man who loved me for exactly who I was. It wasn't grand or legendary, but it was mine, and it was enough. You deserve that peace. He reached across the space between them, took her hand. You deserved everything good, and I'm sorry I couldn't give it to you. You gave me something better. You taught me that external validation is worthless, that I had to value myself because nobody else would. That peace lives in choosing yourself instead of sacrificing yourself. So thank you for being exactly the wrong man at the right time to teach me exactly the right lessons. They talked until sunset, about their lives, their regrets, their grandchildren, the strange paths that had led them from desperate love to bitter ending to this quiet reconciliation. When shadows grew long, Alaric's breathing became labored, tired. I should go, Elira said. Let you rest. Will you come back tomorrow? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I'll come back. She visited him every day for 2 weeks, sat beside his bed while he grew weaker, told him stories about her cafe and her village and her simple, beautiful life, held his hand when pain made him gasp, sang old songs from their early years when he couldn't sleep. On the last day, he could barely speak, but he squeezed her hand and whispered, "Thank you for saving me, for forgiving me, for showing me what strength really looks like. Rest now," she said. "You've done your work. You can let go." He died that evening, peaceful, surrounded by family, having made peace with his biggest regret. Elira stood at the bedside and felt something in her chest release, the last thread connecting her to the woman she'd been, the final piece of unfinished business. She attended the funeral, stood at the back while the kingdom mourned their king, listened to speeches about his wisdom and growth and the peaceful, prosperous realm he'd built, knew that half of it was lies and half was truth, and that was how legacies worked. Afterward, the council approached, asked if she'd stay, take a position as advisor, help guide the transition, be part of the kingdom's future. She thanked them, declined politely, explained that her life was elsewhere, that she'd said her goodbyes and made her peace and now it was time to go home. They understood, offered her honors and titles and recognition. She accepted a small pension for her years of service, refused everything else, walked out of the palace one last time with nothing but the clothes she wore and the certainty that this chapter was finally, completely closed. Elira returned to her village and lived another 15 years. Quiet years. Good years. Years of watching grandchildren grow and gardens bloom and the ocean breathe against the shore. She told stories sometimes, about clever queens and foolish kings, about the importance of knowing your worth, about choosing yourself when the world demands sacrifice, about building peace instead of chasing power. Young people listened, some heard, some didn't. That was all right. Everyone had to learn their own lessons in their own time. On her last day, she sat on her favorite rock watching sunset paint the ocean gold and red. Her body was failing. She could feel it, the slow shutdown of systems that had carried her through 83 years of life. But she wasn't afraid, wasn't fighting, just watching and breathing and feeling grateful for the strange, beautiful path she'd walked. She thought about the woman she'd been, the plain queen desperate for validation, the competent strategist holding up a kingdom, the legend who'd walked away from power, all those versions of herself, all those choices that had led here. And she felt proud, not of victories or recognition or any of the grand achievements, but of the moment she'd chosen to stop performing, to stop sacrificing, to value herself enough to walk away. That choice had saved her, had given her 50 years of peace and love and simple joy, had let her die happy instead of bitter, had transformed her from a symbol into a person. The sun touched the horizon, light spilled across water like liquid gold, and Elira felt something in her chest settle. Complete. Finished. She closed her eyes, breathed deep, smiled, and let go. They found her the next morning, peaceful, still smiling, sitting on her rock like she'd just fallen asleep watching the ocean she loved. The village mourned. Simple ceremony, friends and family sharing stories about Lyra, who'd run the cafe, who'd grown the best tomatoes, who'd taught their children to value themselves, who'd been kind and steady and exactly enough. Nobody mentioned queens or legends or statues. That wasn't who she'd been to them. She'd just been Lyra, their friend, their neighbor, their teacher. And that was the legacy that mattered. But word reached the capital eventually. The competent queen had died. Peaceful, happy, having built a life worth living on her own terms. They wanted to bring her body back, give her a state funeral, add her to the royal crypts, make her death as legendary as her life. But her will was clear. She'd left instructions. Simple burial in the village, no pomp, no ceremony, just earth and ocean and the people who'd known her as herself. They honored her wishes, because even in death, even as a legend, Elira Vale had earned the right to choose herself. Her grandchildren scattered her ashes on the ocean, watched waves take them, whispered thank you for teaching us that we're enough, just as we are. And the tide carried her out, into the vast blue, into the peace she'd spent a lifetime finding, into the quiet, eternal rest of a woman who'd learned the hardest lesson and lived it completely. That power means nothing if you lose yourself earning it. That recognition is worthless if it costs your peace. That walking away takes more courage than staying. And that choosing yourself, valuing yourself, loving yourself enough to demand better is the most revolutionary act possible. Queen Elira Vale had been many things. Competent strategist, legendary leader, plain woman in a world that valued beauty. But in the end, she'd been one thing that mattered more than all the rest: free. Completely, eternally, beautifully free. And that was enough. More than enough. Everything.